Okay. So let's be honest around the room, and ID if you want to raise your hand, just let us know. But who here has read all the books?
Tom.
I'm a little.
Hey guys, and welcome to GTLive, where today it is a glorious day because it's been about a year, I would say a year, since we got on this channel and did some serious FNAF talking. For those of you who watch all of our Theorist content over on GTLive a couple weeks ago, we did kind of a talkback, a live analysis discussion about the timeline. That was us in the middle of things. We were in the process of solving things. We were getting your feedback. And so that was a much more casual discussion. But today, we are getting serious with our theories, with our lore solving, and with our FNAF discussion, because if there is one franchise that the internet takes seriously, it's this one about serial killer, murder, animatronics set in a pizzeria restaurant from who knows what decade we're in at this point. But you know what? The exciting thing is we're surrounded today by people who think they do know what decade we're in when it comes to this franchise. There's a lot of disagreement amongst the people that I'm going to show you today, and I am very excited to introduce them all to you. So we are joined by a literal cavalcade of FNAF theorists here today. There are so many boxes on screen at this point. So many people. Everyone wave to the camera. Hey.
I can't wave at the camera.
You know what? Just
In spirit.
just like wave. Yeah, we have FNAF theorists old and new joining us today to talk about all things Five Nights at Freddy's. Obviously, the movie just announced its release date. We just finished our FNAF timeline. We're still waiting for the Ruin DLC, which who knows when that'll drop? Maybe it'll drop at the end of this live stream because that's the way things happen in the FNAF world. What stranger things have happened. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. So there's a lot that we want to cover today. Timeline, movie talk, release dates, all of this stuff. So it's a lot to cover, and we want to keep this to kind of like 2 hours today. So to make sure that we're moving things forward, keeping things tight, let's just go around the board and introduce people, starting with some familiar faces from Team Theorist over here. We have Tom and Dan. So Tom and Dan, say hi.
Yes, hi. Hello.
Tom, our game theory creative director. You've seen him on the GTLive couch multiple times. The man who has spent way too many hours in my attic talking about murder animatronics. That is not a joke. Yep. It is literally in my attic where we had the conspiracy board all drawn out. John can attest. John, you saw it up there, right? You can attest.
I don't think I saw the board.
Wait, did I not show you the board?
No, I've been in the attic.
The board?
He's been to the attic. You've been to the attic, though.
Yes.
You've been to the attic, the Fnatic. You've been there.
The Fnatic.
The Fnatic.
Yeah, the FNAF attic, or Fnatic for short. So, Tom joining us from UK. Thanks for joining us super late.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
My partner in crime and the guy who gets to come to conclusions with me, but then skate through when those things are poorly received by the internet. So
Absolutely. The man who had to speed run all FNAF lore to join this channel and then just gets to mosey on by just like nobody sees me, nobody sees
he's my book buddy, in for lack of a better word. And meanwhile, we got head editor Dan, the other guy who it's not necessarily required to follow the franchise as closely as he does, but I think we've been on board this train together for a long time, and so Dan, it's one of those like what is it, the sunk cost fallacy, where at this point you've been gambling
put too much stock into this.
You've been gambling at this casino for too long that you're like, well, I guess I'm committed to it at this point.
This time I came better prepared. I have some books.
Oh, wow!
I spent the money that you gave me on some books. So, speaking of more sunk cost,
well, are you saying the money I gave you like personally, or the money that I gave you as a corporate entity? Like, hey, this is business expense.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, good. Okay, like if you're spending your own personal money, please do not do that. Meanwhile, in the familiar faces column, we got to go over to our partner in crime here, Dawko. Hey, Dawko.
Hello. Hi everybody.
The other elder statesman of FNAF content, fresh off his visit to the movie set. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Doing good?
A little bit #jealous of you getting to see all the stuff happening over in New Orleans for yourself, but that's fine. I don't have a chip on my shoulder or anything about that. It's cool. We could still be friends.
I hope so.
Yeah. No, of course. How's life over in your neck of the woods, Dawko?
Yeah, it's all good. It's turning warm now, finally. It's been cold for ages over here.
When you say warm in your neck of the woods, how is that actually defined? I feel like your warm is very different from our warm.
As soon as the temperature increases by 2 degrees, everybody just wants to go out. as soon as the sun goes out, everybody's just outside all the time.
Nice. Awesome. Yep. So have you gotten to see the light of day or no?
Not really.
Cool.
I'm a night owl. I had to get up early today to watch the Mario movie. I was meant to say FNAF movie then. I meant the Mario movie.
Wow, that's an early screening. Wow.
I didn't watch that, guys, I promise.
I was going to say, just like the character encyclopedia, you're getting an early preview of it. The whole thing's going to start with special thanks to Dawko. Parentheses, any complaints about this, please level them all at Dawko.
No.
For P.S. His DMs are open.
Please, that was a joke. Do not send any angry comments about the FNAF lore to Dawko. That is not his fault. Meanwhile, in order of familiarity, I would say with people on the couch, John from the channel FNAF, you've joined us on the couch recently. You were here with me and Raleigh a couple of weeks ago. That was super fun.
Yeah.
And also, you were on last year's stream. So how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me back.
No, absolutely. You've been busy too. You've been solving every single thumbnail. It's I solved FNAF lore after 9 years. I'm oh, thank goodness.
I can't help myself.
So glad someone did this. Finally,
I learned that from someone in this call.
Dawko.
We don't claim to solve it all. We just claim that it's the last one.
Exactly.
Yes, over and over and over again.
I mean,
I've worked on the final episode 3 times at this point.
If he declares the final episode enough times, eventually it'll get there.
It's true.
Eventually it'll be true.
You got to shoot your shot. And also, if John learned solved from us, we learned the final chapter from the creator of the series himself, where I think it's been the final chapter 5 separate times in the franchise.
FNAF 3 was the end. FNAF 4 was the end. Sister location.
Yeah.
Pizzeria Simulator.
Exactly, right? It just keeps going. Now there's movies and this and that. Anyway, and hey, since you were just talking, ID's Fantasy is joining us. A new a new avatar to the screen. I guess that works. Yeah, new PNG, slightly animated. We're not as animated as you tend to be on your channel, but thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. I am very excited. And shaking a little bit, but it's okay.
Shaking with rage or excitement?
Excitement and internal screaming.
Okay. Excited screaming or can't wait to launch into I don't know, John's latest theory.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'm just both. Oh no.
No, I'm not that passionate about his theory. There are bits of it that I think are okay. No, you did good. You did good. I'm just messing with
you. We found the spicy one for this episode.
This is going to be the spiciest episode yet.
Sorry, guys.
No. And this is great. For those of you who don't know ID's channel, it's ID's Fantasy. And I briefly mention her channel in our timeline because a lot of the ideas I'm excited about some of the new faces that are joining us between Hyperdroid, ID, and Rytoast, who we're going to get to the next two here in a minute. You are coming up with some really awesome new ideas. You're approaching it in a very different, fun way. And it's one of those things where, absolutely deserving shout-outs because you are making me question a lot of my assumptions and getting me to look at things in new perspectives, which is why I'm so excited to have this discussion with you today. So thank you for joining.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Moving on to Hyperdroid. In my screen, he's the middle. I don't know where he is on the screen that everyone else is seeing. But whereas ID's Fantasy helped me solve certain bits of the lore, or at least make me think I have a more solid grasp of the lore, Hyperdroid, actually, I don't know if you know this, but you inspired the way that that I wanted to write this timeline episode. So for those of you who don't know, Hyperdroid for the past couple years has released your official timeline, yes?
Yeah. It was an hour and a half to 2 hour long video, but it was a mini series like you did, where it was like 4 or 5 parts and then just put them all into one.
Yeah, and the thing that I loved about yours was the presentation style, because unlike the way that we had done ours in the past, where it was very much like evidence, proof, and it gets very dry and kind of tends to get lost in the weeds. At a certain point, you have to zoom out and realize that, this is a story, right? And there are characters and narrative arcs and things like that. And the way that you present this hour and a half, 2 hour long epic of the FNAF timeline is from a character basis, right? Like the stuff that you're saying is evidentiary, but you're really dialing into the story. Like you're writing a full on script of what this story is, which is really cool.
Yeah, although a lot of it's incorrect, but that's fine.
Don't worry.
It's fine.
Ours is too, and we've been doing it longer. We're all in the same boat, my friend. We're all
part of being a FNAF theorist.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
right. It's like I've proven this 5 times, and then retcon or new game or oopsies. So new book, So don't worry about that at all. Real quick? What's your history with the FNAF franchise?
I started playing after your FNAF 2 theory, actually. That was what first got me into FNAF. And then,
Thank you.
That's cool. It all started from there.
Nice. Oh, classic phone guy is purple guy?
Oh, I'm still a believer of that. I'm sorry.
Yeah!
That's so true.
In my heart of hearts, I know.
I can tell, we all have
In my heart.
Yeah, as FNAF theorists, I think we all have to recognize our own biases. And I can tell you every time.
There's always that one theory.
Yeah, no, every time we go back and restart research on an episode or research on a timeline like this, I'm like, but can he be the phone guy? That's always the place where I'm like, please, just make him the phone guy. That would be amazing. Sadly, I can ignore some evidence, I guess, but I can't ignore that much to make it work.
They'll just drop an Easter egg in the DLC, and we'll all be like, "Oh, there it is!" And suddenly the community will just freak out.
Right, that'll be exciting. And then last but certainly not least is Rye Toast. Riley, hey there.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
Tired, but I just finished this, which was all coffee, so I'm doing good.
Oh, good. Excellent. And are you joined by a cat friend as well, or no?
I do have a sleeping cat who is out of frame, right here.
Okay.
Other than that, the door's closed because my other cat is a menace, and he will knock over all my lighting.
Best to avoid that then.
Yeah.
And
the third cat's too shy, so she's upstairs.
So I got to ask. So obviously you've been launching out a bunch of different FNAF perspectives. I love what you did recently, which was, hey, let's just go back to what we know from just the games. In this day and age where there's books and timelines and character encyclopedias and novel spin-offs and novella spin-offs and this and that. The series that you did, which I really appreciated, was this idea of hey, what can we learn about these games from just the games? Can you actually solve the lore based on what is given to us from the games themselves? And I thought that was cool. Do you have any kind of overall learnings or thoughts from going through that process at this point?
I think the big takeaway was you can make a timeline with just the games. I don't think you can make the correct timeline with just the games at this point. I think there was definitely a time in the FNAF franchise, before certain games came out and before the story was tweaked, that you could have. I think by sister location, you at least need a book or 2. And at this point, you need 5.
Yeah, which honestly is something that I want to get to here, actually, and that maybe that's a great place to start. So before we get into the nitty gritty of our timeline and solving the lore and kind of where the franchise is headed moving forward, I think that's a really interesting place to start. Because John, when you were in town, you and I had a couple of conversations. You, me, and Tom actually had a couple conversations about your thoughts and feelings on how the books are now required reading in a lot of ways, where there does seem to be certain key character reveals, certain evidence points, certain revelations that happen in the spin-off books, whether they be the novels or novellas with Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex, and how that how you feel about that as a FNAF theorist and as a fan of the games, but maybe not necessarily of the book. So I'd love your thoughts on that, and I'd love to open that to everyone, actually.
Sure. I think it's tough because my mind has changed back and forth with watching the people in this call's videos. Because I originally thought GGY came out and I was like, there's no way you could figure out that Gregory's patient 46 without GGY. And
for those of you who don't know, because again, at this point, I can't assume that people have read story number 25 of Tales of the Pizzaplex, the second series of the Fazbear Fright series. You know, book number 5. What is it? It's book number 4, book number 5.
Whichever-
Five. Bobby Dots
Bobby
conclusion.
Dots conclusion.
Right? It's 5 story 3 or whatever. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that one.
But that's the one that's important. And so if there's those of you listening at home and you're like, what is John talking about? It's this story called GGY. It's basically a story about how there's this person who's really good at the arcade games in the Pizzaplex, and they have the top score at all of them, and all of them are signed GGY. And basically, the long and short of it is there's a conspiracy afoot, and this kid who's revealed to be Gregory, or it has the name Gregory, is also Dr. Rabbit. And which is, that's saying a lot. So it in a lot of ways, it is very heavy evidence to say, like, hey, Gregory and Afton are connected in some way because he's Dr. Rabbit. He's nefarious in some way. Oh, and then also he's connected to the disappearances of therapists.
Yep.
Right? So those are kind of like the 3 key points coming out of this is, and it perfectly matches on to what is happening over in Security Breach. You have top arcade games, signed GGY, name's Gregory, connected to Afton, and disappearing therapists. Which again, the whole community is like, well, this is about as clear cut as you get. He is 46.
Exactly, and I think it's frustrating for me because people could say, oh yeah, you could have easily figured out Gregory's patient 46, but I think the people who figured out Gregory was patient 46 when Security Breach came out, it was basically just guessing because there were so many. It was
as someone who did that, I challenge that argument, but that's fine.
Well, you said that yourself in your video. You said this is what I think.
Yeah,
like this
it wasn't
sense,
clean.
but there's so many holes in the
Correct.
theory.
Correct.
That it's like I can't even say that that's definitive.
Yeah.
And I think the most frustrating thing for me was Gregory having the top score on the arcade machines, because it's like, I thought that was just an Easter egg, but it's like, I've learned my lesson. I thought that was an Easter egg because you also see like Vanny and Freddie and Roxy on the machine. So it's like, obviously this is not meant to be anything serious because they're not playing the machines. You also see Baby have the top scores on some of the machines, BBY. So
she's pretty good. She's a whiz at Glitch Trap Adventures or whatever that one is.
Exactly. But yeah, that's I think. Yes, I think it's not really solvable without the books at this point.
Okay, so let's be honest around the room, and ID, if you want to raise your hand, just let us know. But who here has read all the books?
Tom. I'm a little.
Tom.
I'm a little behind, but I'm basically there. I've tried. I'm getting through this last one. I've been busy.
How does one raise hand? Like I've read them all.
Have you read them?
I think I have the hot take that I like the books, but
No, that's I think that's totally
no,
valid.
I don't think that's a hot take.
No,
I don't think the books are that bad. I think the thing is what makes it feel so bad, or that, oh no, these aren't good, is because of the connection they have to games and how it's like, which pieces can you take, which pieces aren't. And it being part of FNAF as a whole, I think, is why there's that feeling of these books aren't good. Whereas I think actually, as little, novellas for teenagers, really, they're actually pretty good.
I feel like they're definitely as good as like the Goosebumps that I grew up with. Like they're at about that level, I would say.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I do. It's funny because part of me wishes that the novellas were actual, like Goosebumps were actual fully fledged books, right? And I think a lot of the novellas, to me, I wish there was a little bit more editing down and saying like, hey, these are the important or the best stories that we have. Let's flesh these out into full books similar to the Goosebumps series, where it's a scary story with full chapters and character arcs, and we learn who these people are, as opposed to like, here's page 1, character description, motivations. Okay, here's 5 more pages of like, here's what happened, and then, you know, dark takeaway at the end, right? I feel like they're slightly too abbreviated for me to be like super invested in, but there's some really solid stories in there. And so I'd be more than willing to sacrifice a couple outings to the Fazgoo land in order to get to learn a little bit more about the characters in GGY or the characters in Bobby Dots or Haps was an incredibly dark and scary story that is like so disturbing and is really compelling, but I would have loved to have learned more about these kids, their motivations, before they're just like, and the kids disappear into the ball pit or whatever. You know.
And there they go.
Yeah, and there they go. So
yeah. Although I will say there are some of them that you could go, oh, you could cut 20 pages from this and it would probably be the same.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'll throw out there, and again, this is not really a hot take of mine, but I do think it's an interesting observation, right? FNAF as a series has always been a game franchise where so much of the plot happens outside of the games, which is weird, right? When you actually stop and look at what actually is happening in the games, not a whole lot. But when you look at like, hey, you know, Michael pukes up Ennard at the end of Sister Location, and then fast forward to FNAF 6, and Baby is now separate from Ennard, and there's a Molten Freddy, and this, and oh yeah, the only way to have known that was through the source code of Scott's website at one point, like that.
Yep.
That's kind of a big point where if you're just playing the games, and I you know, and this goes back to what Raito's, what you did in your kind of experiment, right? Where it's like there's a lot of meta text in this series already, you know, where you're going onto teaser images and source code images, and you know, if your latest theory is to be believed, John, like to like the description of Scott's Reddit post at one point, right? You know, paragraph 4, it's paragraph 4 of Scott's Reddit post. Who knows? And so there's a lot of like reading between the lines there that is already necessary. And so the books almost feel like another extension to that. Now, whether that's good or bad, and I think the volume of that has certainly changed. It's kind of like the MCU in a lot of ways, where you have these Disney Plus series, and it's like, well, if you want to follow the MCU, you better follow every episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier and What If, you know? So that's I think the trick that you find yourself in at this point.
Yeah.
I think that I think the books are. Oh, sorry, John.
No, go ahead. You go.
I think the books are they're good. Some of them are good, but it also cuts off some of the community. And when you're like, if you mention it in a theory, for example, you automatically section off a whole part of FNAF theorists who just, they don't have time to read, they aren't caught up with the books, or they didn't even know there was new series release or anything like that. That's the thing that they should definitely, like you said, make it more clear. This is important. Please read this one.
Yeah, that's why I try to mention the books a lot in my theories, is because, like, a lot of people don't read them, so they don't have these clues that I'm seeing. Like, we learn a lot about, like, Remnant and stuff from the Fazbear Fright series, and you don't, like, there are hints at it in the games. Like, I mentioned in my most recent video on Sister Location, the song title Alchemist Fantasy for the Security Puppet minigame, and the whole Alchemist thing does give a hint to what Remnant can do, but we actually get that fleshed out in Fazbear Frights, and you'd have to find the song title in order to find that.
Yeah, that's the thing. When something is labeled like ultimate guide or character encyclopedia, that's when everyone's like, yes, okay, this is important. This is the thing, the one that we need for that. Whereas, yeah, there are so many novels and books that are coming out like every 2 months. It's so hard to keep up with. You know, I'm paid to keep up with this, and it's hard to keep up with this.
I mean, and as your boss and as the other guy who does, you know, do a lot, I mean, who is right alongside you reading these books, and the reason I didn't raise my hand is because I skipped Somnophobia, and I'm getting to it, and the Sea Bonnie's story. I got distracted and didn't finish that particular
the most
story.
important one.
It's a fun one.
Right. So I'm like, I think I know the relative lore importance of Sea Bonnies, right?
My first Five Nights at Freddy's Nightmares was about the Sea Bonnies.
Right. And then all of a sudden, Dawko says, yeah, put that one in the character encyclopedia. And I'm like,
He's been sitting there waiting for that to come up. He's just like, no.
Got him. I was waiting.
It's all his fault.
No, but you know, so those are the ones that I have to catch up on. But I feel like I've read like the vast majority, and especially all the important ones and things like that. But it is one of those things where it is a full-time job almost at this point to keep up with the constant like updates and book releases and this and that. And I know from personal experience with Tom and I, where it's hard for us to dive as deeply into other lores of other franchises, and because there's such a huge volume of FNAF that also is requiring us to stay up with it. And Dawko, I know you used to do like deep dives into each individual story and each individual like Fazbear Fright and this and that, and I've noticed those have been fewer and farther between at this point. I'm assuming it's the same thing, right? Because you are uploading every single day, and I mean, as a fellow, you know, guy who releases way too many videos, I understand like that is such a hard grind, and so to fit in, like, let me read for the next 4 to 6 hours an entire book or however long it takes you to get through it, and then create a video of it's tough.
It's not just reading it as well though, because while you're reading it, you have to make notes on everything. Like every page, I was just doing like a bit, because I did a summary, so anything important you have to write down and stuff. I think with the Fazbear Frights, I didn't mind those, but I think with these security breach ones, especially the Gregory story, I feel like the Gregory story should have been in the game, because it's important, right? It's important. I feel like that was the most important like story that we've got so far, and it's really important for security breach because we're playing as Gregory and we didn't know who he was in the game at all. But like we had to read a story outside the games to know that. So what was I going to say?
That was solid.
I think. Well, I'm hoping that the Ruin DLC explains more about Gregory. That's what I'm hoping. If we don't know anything else about Gregory now, like Gregory's done in the games, I'll be a bit disappointed, because I do feel like Ruin is a chance for Steelwall to, you know, show who Gregory is, because because of the Gregory story. So
well, and also, I mean, Gregory was really well received by the community, which I think was the other side of that, right? Which is everyone coming out of that game really liked, like, say what they will about the lore and the gameplay and the state of the release. Like, if you look at the fan response to Security Breach, you know, a year out now, but like seeing how people reacted in the aftermath and the memes that were made and this and that, people loved Gregory. They loved his design. They loved his characterization. They thought he was like a fun, confident, like sassy boy, but also like smart and kind of like he was cool. People dug him. And so I think people were really eager to find out more about him, because they're like, hey, finally there's a new character here. There's, you know, a protagonist that we can actually latch onto who isn't some faceless security guard or some reanimated corpse guy, purple, whatever, who knows, right? And so you, for the first time, you had someone to latch onto, and people really responded positively. And so we're all eager to find out more. That being said, if it is revealed in Ruin that he is an Afton, or connected in some way to, if he is Patient 46 and is like a thrall of the Afton virus or whatever, like, what do you think? Does that make him cooler? Does that make him lesser? Like, how do you think people would respond to that?
It depends on how they execute it, I think.
Okay.
Because as of Security Breach, the way he acts, even like away from Freddy, doesn't really line up with him being under Glitch Trap's control, because why else would Burn Trap be like making Glamrock Freddy attack him and all that? So it seems like if he was under Glitch Trap's control, at some point, there's some way that he was able to break free. Like, maybe, like, there's the Princess Quest games that free Vanessa. Maybe there's some other arcade game that freed Gregory.
He's got all the high scores.
There's something else that this is like, just like sort of Ruin related.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. But basically, in the initial teaser for Ruin, one thing that I noticed, there, like, in the screens that show Gregory, like, one of them says "help me," so maybe maybe Glitch Trap captured him back or whatever. But in one of them, it looks like he's holding some sort of briefcase or something. There's like something squarish in the bottom, and arms do not bend like that. So I was like, maybe he went back and he found some secrets or something, and he's going to blow the company. But then, however long ago it was, where there was that teaser of I think it was the Security Breach TV website, that it had handles and it was this like computer TV setup looking thing. I'm thinking maybe, so someone in my comment section actually pointed out, maybe that's what Gregory was holding in the teaser.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know and who don't follow this franchise as religiously as everyone here does, and sacrifice all your time and waking energy to this franchise. There was a couple of leaked images on Security Breach TV, or from Security Breach TV, which is where all the kind of like hype for Security Breach's release came from. It was where you watch like Freddy and Friends on tour, and that's where we got first glimpses of the Blob. That's where we got first glimpses of Sun and Moon. That's where the meme of Music Man really got its start. There you go. Check that one off the bingo list.
He did the thing, guys. He did the thing.
If you had that one,
Dream's over. We're done.
Let's see. All I need now is mentioning Dream Theory, and I've got FNAF bingo. Did it?
There we go.
Yeah, instead of bingo, it's Chica, Bonnie. But yeah, no. It's so for those of you who don't know, it was this image that was kind of like it leaked out. It's unsure of whether or not it's actually going to happen or whatever. But people thought it was going to be released in anticipation of the Ruin DLC, and I believe the date was April 6th. Was one of the there were two dates that were associated with it. So April 6th has come and gone, so that didn't happen. But I believe maybe April 6th
was April 12th. That was the second one,
right?
Yeah.
But April 6th, that's when the movie news came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the release date. No, it was yesterday, wasn't it?
Yep.
It was
yes.
I believe so. Anyway.
No. I don't know.
I woke up to it yesterday, which means it released in America late the day before.
Yeah, maybe.
5th.
But I'm, so maybe that was part of the reason, right? Like at this point, there's so many moving parts to the FNAF franchise that either that date was a reference to like, hey, that's when we're doing a movie drop, or that was the original date for this website to go live. But because there was already like Jason Blum's like, I'm going to drop the news about the movie release date, they had to push it back to a later date maybe, and that's potentially the reason why. So you're not getting like FNAF movie and new game and like all the FNAF. You get a FNAF. You get a FNAF. You get a FNAF. But going back to what you said earlier, idea about what prompted Gregory to, I don't know, become not a thrall. I like to think that moment where Glamrock Freddy catches eyes with Gregory in the audience and they lock eyes across a
that could do
Plex,
it too.
And they're like, we glitch out of love for each other. So
the power of love solves everything.
That's true.
I think there's something to that, because in GGY we see that Glamrock Freddy is like almost programmed to protect, for no better term, Dr. Rabbit, Gregory, to cover for him, make sure he's safe. So if there is a switch in Gregory and suddenly he's not under the thrall, if the glitch trap virus or something would go to send Glamrock Freddy to go get him, to be like, oh, he's not under my control, get him, that would conflict.
Yeah.
Because his core programming is protect this kid, and now he's got a command against that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But then also remember, he did get rebooted at the very start of Security Breach, so that might have changed his code or whatever explanation you want to say.
And that could be part of why he attacks in the low power mode. Once he got rebooted, whatever that original programming was wiped, but because he woke up in safe mode, he was still able to do his own thing without.
Yeah,
cool. So, real quick, I want to make sure that we're hopping into the timeline talk now. But the last thing I did want to say is I had a quick question for Hyperdroid, which is you also did an interesting thing with one of your recent kind of like timelines or theories where you solved the timeline or solved the order of events by
solved.
Well, I mean, everything is in heavy quotes when we're talking about FNAF, and then this happened. Yeah. Where you solved it by basically looking at the context of the time when the game was released, right? So, like, what was the story meant to be at that period in time? Like, it was almost like a historical
How it was
review.
Given to us.
Exactly. Tell me just a little bit about kind of your learnings from doing that, or like some interesting conclusions, or like what was worthwhile about that approach?
I think, well, Raito dropped a video today that was about FNAF 4. That's the one that definitely seems like it got changed again and again. Like there were nightmares, there were actual nightmares, but now they're real, but now they're both. it goes back and forth, but I wanted to do it that way because I think I found it very like more easy, because you, instead of having so much information all at once, you're going how it was given to us, and how, because Scott mentions how he follows up in the next game with something we got confused, something like that. But I found it way easier to just go game by game by game, how Scott was trying to hint us and steer us in certain directions.
Yep. It's great. And again, like, it goes to this idea of there's so many different ways of approaching this problem at this point, which is so cool. And I think that's really interesting to see the conclusions that Rytos is getting, the conclusions that Hyperdroid is getting, the conclusions that ID's Fantasy is getting, like that John, you're getting. Like, so many people are approaching this from so many different angles. Which leads to the
we
first...
just all get wildly different answers.
Well, right. Which then leads to my first major, like, now we move on to the second arc of our little live stream here today, which is the timeline itself. Let's talk about this. And oh yes, Ash, what's going on? Oh, Ash is flagging me down.
Hi.
I had a good segue planned.
Hello.
I'm gonna hold on to
Yes.
my good segue. Don't forget what I just said, guys.
All right.
Okay.
Yes. Don't
Go for
forget
it,
what
Ash.
he said. Hi. I'm Ash. What's up? So, you might, after listening to all these questions, be thinking, wow, I have questions. I want to put that into the chat. Is anyone looking after that? Yes, me. So put your questions in the chat, and I will throw them at these lovely, lovely people closer to the end of the stream.
Do you have one?
Well, I have the question, is anyone keeping track of questions for chat?
There you go. Nice.
That would do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who was that one by?
That was by Kaleidoscope Universe.
Well, there you go, Kaleidoscope Universe. We are here and we are listening. Ash has got it under control.
I hear you. I see you.
Okay, ready for my excellent segue?
Yes.
Now that's been completely derailed.
This better be good.
No. Well, it was going from, hey, let's talk about, like, there's so many interesting conclusions, ID throughout, like, whoa, and we're all coming to different answers. To which the question I have is the timeline solvable? Is there a timeline? Can we solve it or no?
The way I kind of see it is I think Scott knows what the timeline is, but I saw this great comparison made in my comment section the other day of how in Dungeons and Dragons, the DM knows what's going on and they can try to leave clues for the players, but the players will just wildly misinterpret it all the time, and then the DM tries to give more clues to steer them on the right path, and then they just keep going more and more off the rails. So I think it's solvable, but there's just a lot of information and so many different ideas that at this point, Scott's probably the only one with a solid idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because he actually was the one who put the thought into it.
Dan, as my favorite DM, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, as the person that has DM'd Matt and Steph and the rest of the Theorists team, things get out of control real fast.
As a forever DM, I relate. That's it.
Yeah, we're bonding here. You guys want to talk about D&D?
The movie came out. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Speaking of movies that have come out recently,
I will say though, is like, if the timeline is solvable, I don't think there's a way to solve it as of the current state of where it is, like here, April 7th, 2023. When the movie comes out, maybe we'll get a bit more. When Ruin DLC comes out, then I feel like we can solve significantly more. Right now, I just feel like there's too many missing pieces.
Yeah, with Security Breach, it feels like they sort of cut out half the story, so we don't even know what's going on there for most of it. Yes. And so maybe Ruin's going to be us getting the other half that was originally excluded.
So it's interesting, right? I would actually disagree, and I think this is my own personal failing, and I think it's I don't know, like, blame the franchise too, but like, and Dawko, I see you leaning back in your chair judgmentally at one point during Dan's answer, so I'm going to toss this to you next. So get ready. But like, to me, I think the series has moved on from the initial 5-6 games. Like, I think we're now in now we're in FNAF VR and beyond, right? We're past the inflection point of FNAF 6 ended whatever the first arc was, and now we're in like phase 2 of this Marvel's, actually technically it would be phase 3 of this Marvel Cinematic Universe, I guess, because phase 1 would have been FNAFs 1 through 4. Yeah, FNAF's 1 through 4. Phase 2 was Sister Location and 6 and FNAF World, and that was phase 2. Phase 3 then is this inflection point of FNAF VR, AR, security breach, and then we'll see what they decide to do with Ruin and beyond. But like, to me, I think we're in phase 3 of this franchise, and it feels like, as someone who has spent way too much time in my Fnatic with my FNAF boys trying to solve this thing, I think that the pieces are in place for us, but we just don't know how to put. That's like, where's the
bingo? Yeah, that's the point I was trying to make earlier. I probably just worded it weird. Like, the pieces are there, we just don't know what we're doing with them all the time.
Right? And so, and Daka, what do you think? Again, as the other guy who has been here for far too long, you know, and who's been here since early days with me. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, yeah, I think the pieces are there, but there's so many pieces that kind of fit and some don't, and there's different interpretations of those pieces that can be made. That I don't think that like you could have a solid timeline, but other people could disagree with it, right? But in the background, Scott could be watching your video and going, "Yeah, this is exactly right. This is the perfect timeline." But because everybody's got different ideas, it's very hard to, you know, everybody to agree.
Which timeline's right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Daco.
I think, like I said, the pieces are there, and I think that segment is done. I don't think we're going to get, like, in the Ruin DLC, I think it would be very hard for them to fit things in from that era of the timeline to connect things, unless, like, in the future, there's remakes of the games, or I know Steelwall were interested in possibly making a Fredbear game, so stuff like that might help in the future if remakes happen and stuff. So, other than that, I don't know. I think we're done with that now, so...
Right, and even if they are doing like because I know the interview that you're talking about with Steel Wool, who are like, we want to do a Fredbear's Family Diner game, but that would be a very different era of the story, right? That would probably be like FNAF Origins in a lot of ways. That wouldn't be this kind of like mid, because like really the main plot and the one that we're like, where's Sister Location fit in? Where's the murders fit in? Whatever. All of that is this kind of like middle chunk where Afton's already established, murders have already happened, or you know, are in the process of happening, whatever, and you know, Michael's exploring Sister Location, right? Like that is what's the term for it? In media res. Like the action is already in progress. We don't have their origin story, which again is one of the things that in our timeline and why episode 1, I'm like, this is kind of speculative and controversial, but like you start getting hints as to what the origins are and kind of like what is the start of this story from books, from graphic novels, and from like the poster that's released in Security Breach, but that's really about it.
Yeah.
I think it's.
And I was going to say,
go ahead, Tom.
You go, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to quickly say, I think it's important to note that now that everyone's completely disagreed with me, that I am less the FNAF theorist and more the FNAF cynic. So
yes, he brings a cynical take
worth.
Yeah, he brings a cynical take. But no, Dorka, I think you touched on something really interesting, which is what I found when I joined the team here, was because I came in knowing as much of FNAF lore as I could from our own videos, and then going, right, I'm now diving into these theories from the game theorist's perspective. But all that is theories upon theories upon theories upon theories. At the end of the day, there is very little that is like 100% confirmed in this franchise. And so in terms of what is solvable, yes, it probably is, but it would probably involve upending some of these core values that we have theorized for so long that we've basically made them canon within the fandom. And I'm not just talking about theorists in general, like as a thing. I'm talking about like theorists of FNAF over the internet. But it's that thing of we are now so built, so theory deep now, it's impossible to know, well, where did we go wrong or where could we split? And that's why it's been fascinating seeing like you guys all come up and do new theories with new perspectives, constantly finding new clues and putting new stuff together. But I think that's why the clues are there for it to be solvable, but I think given the state of where we've ended up, it's very hard to do it.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I think part of the problem is it's a flawed question because I think at this point the timeline is solvable, but finding the correct timeline is the issue. Because I think at this point in the franchise, with the assumptions we have to make and the evidence we have, you can come to several different completely like evidence-backed valid timelines. The question is which one is the one that's intended. And I think that's the issue where we're at.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then I toss it over to John and say like, hey, are we at a point in the series? Because I've had this debate with myself, with other people. Like, are we at this point in the series where it's like, hey, Scott, we'd love for you to hop onto Reddit for your one time a year at this point and bless us with like, give us like 3 answers. Or like, hey, like confirm 1 or 2 things, or do you think the character encyclopedia was meant to be that? You know, like was character encyclopedia like, hey, the FNAF 4 was actually a child dreamer, like it was the kid dreaming this whole time, like that's pretty explicit. Or do we need like, you know, what do we need at this point to feel confident?
Thoughts and prayers. I don't know. I think
Real.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
We need
it's
God.
interesting. I
Can
do
we get him on the
think,
call?
I think the timeline is solvable. I really do think the story is solvable and all the pieces are in place for us. I don't think we're done with the past era of the games. I disagree. And I think the sister location room and security breach proves that. And I think the message on the wall proves that. I think when Scott said that all of his next games are going to answer questions from his past games, security breach and what I coined as the Into Madness era of FNAF is his answer to sister location. Because sister location was about building human animatronics, and that is something he never ever touched on in his core games. I think a lot of people like to say that they think Into Madness is still going to be its own game. I think Into Madness is these new games, and this is Scott's story still. And I think sister location still plays a big role in what we're seeing in security breach. That's what I think. I think it is solvable, and I think after Ruin DLC, it'll be a lot easier.
Well, and it's interesting, right? So you brought up something that I hadn't really considered yet, but I do feel like there's like one last chance to solve, like one last ditch effort to solve this thing, which I suspect is the movie, right? Because Scott in his Reddit post said, when he's like, what's the story of the movie? And he's like, Mike's story. And like, that's the one that we should go with or whatever. Like, to me, it feels like that is the last chance to tell what is like an origin story, or like the story of the murders, or whatever it is, right? And so, you know, and we see in the new poster that's released, which we can talk about a little bit later or whatever, but like you see approaching into a pizzeria that looks like decrepit and old or whatever. And so I could see this being like, hey, if they're going to start with the story, why not tell like the first game's stories? That would be my expectation, right? And so and that's where you're going to bring the fan base on board. That's where you're going to bring like new viewers into this thing on board. And so it's one of those things where like that might be like the last chance of us to be like, here's the last clue that we're given about that original story that they're trying to tell. Here it is. So I actually kind of take back my, like, I do think that the clues are out there, and that at this point, if we're going to solve it, we can solve it. But I think there are a couple more instances where something coming down the pipeline might give us more clues to put it all together again.
For sure. And I think the speech at the end of Sister Location, where Mike is talking to his dad and he says, I did what you told me to do. And the fact that we see Michael's room in security breach, and the message on the wall is about building the breath. Yeah. And I think those are way more connected than we think.
Interesting.
Interesting.
And I think thought about that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Hyper's got something. Oh, go ahead, John.
In the message on the wall, people think that's referencing Gregory. I'm kind of leaning towards it's referencing Elizabeth bots, because it says, I built the breath. They hunt now, drawn to life. And in the sister location, or the sister location speech with Mike, he says, I put her back together. I don't know.
No.
Elizabeth bots.
No, that's fair. And I think the call out of why, and it's something that, you know, we didn't really talk about in our timeline, because there was a lot of controversial stuff to talk about in security breach, a lot of controversial stuff to talk about when solving security breach, that we didn't really address the idea of like, why is Michael's room in you know, Michael's room, or a recreation of Michael's room in the Pizzaplex of all places, like in a new portion of the Pizzaplex. It's a very strange moment. Like, was he living in the Pizzaplex the whole time? Is this a recreation? What is this place meant to be? Very confusing.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hyper, you had something that you want to say?
Well, it is about Michael as well, and it's in the territory of FNAF AR cut emails, so it could be still canon, probably not though, but there is an email that I haven't seen touched on a lot really, which is something that specifically says alert to Miss Michael, not Michael, but M. Afton.
M. Afton.
Yeah, which to me, I don't want it to be true, but Michael might still be here somewhere, but it could have been cut because it's no longer canon. Scott could have told them it's not.
I'm somewhat split on that specifically, because like there's that email that's M. Afton, and that how many M. Aftons are there? But just the ending of the 3-star ending of Security Breach, where you have Gregory, Vanessa, and Freddy on the hill, and Gregory has the Golden Freddy popsicle, and Vanessa has the ice cream cone. It feels like even if you don't believe they are the Afton siblings, it feels like at least it's paralleling them, which would leave Freddy to be paralleling at least Mike, and like why not have? And if Freddy got possessed in the pizzeria simulator location, it feels like that should be Mike. So with the AR thing, like maybe their initial intention was to have actual like human Mike be around, but maybe they scrapped that, and I don't know.
Well, okay, so two things to come out of this, and I'll go with the first one, but I do want to come back to the second idea. So first off, I think, Hyper, you bring up a good point, which is controversial, and I think ebbs and flows within the fandom of this community, which is how do we feel about cut content and what is and isn't usable, right? Because a really good big example of this, right, is in the aftermath of Security Breach's release. Obviously, everyone like rips the game open and starts looking at all the files, and they're like, this asset that leads to the post-it room is called Charlie's Door, and oh my gosh, look at this file folder that has the Princess Quest sprites in it, and it's called Cassidy, and you know, here's all these again meta clues, and in this very meta contextual story, or metatextual story, where we're looking behind the lines, we're looking into the code, we're looking into all the places that we can possibly find lore. And yeah, cut lines and cut dialogue is definitely part of that. So where do you all sit when you're concocting your own theories or when you're coming to your own conclusions about this franchise? How do you use that, or do you not? Are you just like, nope, keep me blind to it?
I think the safe bet is always you can use it as supporting evidence, but it should never be your keystone. I feel like that's the safest bet to go with.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine to like, if you see something in the cut content or the unreleased content it sparks a train of thought, and then you're able to find evidence from there. But like, if there is something in the games that contradicts it, then it should probably take a step back and be like, okay, hold out until there's more.
I mean, that's kind of like with the character encyclopedia. Like, sure, there are some errors in it, but if I see something in there that's like, oh, that's strange, and it could lead to finding stuff out by looking into those like, parts of it.
Yeah, just starts the train of thought.
John has gesticulated to the camera.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that.
No.
I think there's a difference between cut content and things being labeled in the source code. Okay. And I think I value things being labeled in the source code, like Cassidy and Charlie Door, more than cut voice lines that were supposed to be in the game.
Same.
This is gonna be. It's really hard to phrase, but
here's
just
FNAF
go
Cynic
with me.
Jumping in.
Great.
That's your title now, Dan. No longer head editor.
Why do I do the things I do?
Ash, can we get him a lower third that says FNAF Cynic?
Yeah, please. Yep. Ash, if you could just quickly do that for me, thanks. I think the big thing is that cut content shows intent rather than fact. So going along with what Rai was saying is like it supporting evidence. I think it definitely supports, but it's just simply not fact if it's going to be changed later on. I think it shows the intent of what they were hoping to do with it, but whether or not it actually followed through is hard to tell.
Yeah, I think the trouble is always is that thing of, well, why? Why was it cut? So like the whole like you're bleeding versus you're broken, was that for a rating issue? Was that because Scott came in and was like, no, that's not clear enough, let's make it this, that's a clue. It's like in the FAS facts for FNAF AR, it outright confirms 1993, I think, at one point as the date of like FNAF 1 essentially. And it's like, well, okay, was that cut because we shouldn't be tied to that date? Was it cut because, oh no, that's too explicit? Was that like, and that's the thing, both those things could equally be true, but they have very different outcomes depending on which one you go for. So that's where it's hard, it's like, oh yeah, we found this cut content, but we have no idea why.
Yeah, unless Steel Wool is going to walk us through every piece of cut content. Like, we cut this one because of this.
I'm not straight. That'd be nice.
And then at that point, it might be revealing way too much, and Scott's like, "Oh no, stop right there."
The stream just goes blue screened halfway through.
This is the really interesting thing because the DLZ Shipping Solutions whole bit about how I think the FNAF AR animatronics were shipped to the mall and the post-its on the board in Monty's Gator Golf, all of that is cut content from FNAF AR. So it's like it's cut content in FNAF AR, the DLZ Shipping Solutions thing, and Jimmy and all this kind of stuff. Remember Jimmy, but then it shows up in Security Breach. And it's like, okay, I think with FNAF AR specifically, the question is, was it cut content or was it supposed to be released and then FNAF AR got cut off and stopped for some reason?
Another thing I saw about FNAF AR is that some things got leaked and then Illumix or whatever started just wiping things that got leaked. I saw this on Reddit somewhere or something. So it could be that was originally going to be canon, but because it got leaked, they just sort of stopped.
And I think it's that thing like we've kind of all been saying, it's that thing of yeah, sure, okay, so those emails were cut or were never released or whatever, but then John, as you've said, you can go through Security Breach and find the evidence, in which case it becomes
there's a connection.
You can kind of look back at that and go, okay, it's not my main evidence, but actually all of these things do tie up, and I can see there's legitimacy in that rather than just going, here's a FAS fact, it is now fact even though it was cut. Like, you know, there's a difference there.
So this goes back to, and we're stepping a bit kind of like holistically again, but this goes back to one of my other questions, which is, you know, I asked earlier, like, what does Scott need to do, or like, what does this franchise need to do at this point to, like, do we need them to confirm stuff? Do we need them to, you know, give us a couple extra hints or whatever to help move things forward? Do you think that the state of the lore and being theories on theories on theories and what is cut versus what is not, and like it lives in a very gray space right now? We're constantly questioning everything. We're constantly like, is this canon? Is this not? You know, is this right? Is this wrong? Is this theories on theories on theories, or is this like well supported? Do you think at this point, for the health of the franchise, that there needs to be some extra confirmation? Do you think the audience still is eager to solve these mysteries, or do you think they're like, oh my gosh, this is so deep and lost in the weeds that I don't understand this, and you know, just like all of us who are like, we're trying to solve this and it's our homework and we're doing our homework and it's a full-time job. Like, we've said that repeatedly. And imagine the fans where I watch a John Theory video, or I watch a Rye Toast video, or I watch, you know, Hyperdroid or whatever. And I'm like, okay, let me go back. And you see it on our reactions on GTLive at this point, where I'm like, okay, let me just like pause and reflect on the last decade of animatronic murders. And okay, so they're referencing this thing that happened in like the year of 2007, blah, blah. Like, there's so much back catalog for us who know this stuff, right? And so one of my goals with releasing a timeline was, hey, let's put us on a same page here to at least start talking about, you know, give us like something that we can all latch onto, a foundation on which we can build and talk from there, and debunk and show that this was wrong and this was wrong, or like this is right and this is wrong, but like give us all a common language that we can then build on and take apart and rebuild, so that way we can understand this franchise. Do you think at this point the audience needs that, is eager for that, or you think everyone's like, oh, I'm fine being in this like weird nebulous space, like this weird gray area?
I think FNAF thrives on that, honestly. Like, we wouldn't all be here today without it. So I think it needs, they don't need to necessarily reveal things, but maybe another hint or two that might be good. But I feel like the whole FNAF community thrives on the old stuff, the new stuff, the in-between, just trying to solve things that we've been given.
Yeah. Like, the reason there's such a thriving theorist community is because so little is confirmed, people can talk about it and discuss and come to different conclusions. I would not be able to make the content that I do if things were confirmed a certain way. And like, it would probably be nicer for the casual fans if things were confirmed. Yeah. But like, there are pros and cons to any decision you're going to make with something like this. And since FNAF is so heavily based on people making theories about it, I can understand why Scott would be reluctant to put things out there officially.
I think that this is less of a thing that the audience may need and more of something that it's a Scott decision, because when it comes down to it is, the community surrounding FNAF and the theorists and everything that has come from the franchise is such a big part of what has kept it alive for nearly 10 years now? Am I right? Am I wrong? Has it been almost 10 years?
9 years.
Well, 9 years this year.
Earlier, Dawko was talking about reboots and stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even think about that. But no, he's not wrong. Like,
I just got attached.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
wow.
So the big thing is that it's really a question for Scott, and it's a Scott decision, because it's for him is if he doesn't feel like his story is being portrayed in the way that he wants to tell it, then he will give solid facts. I feel like. I think you saw a little bit of that, way back during the first FNAF talkback stream, where he was updating his site based off of what you guys were talking about, because he was trying to he wanted to like any storyteller, you want to tell your story. And so it's really up to Scott. Like, if he feels that the story he wants to tell needs solidified like groundwork for people to build theories on, he'll do that.
I think that's what he's doing with the books right now. I think that's what GGY is. And I think Scott, in the Scott interview with Dawko, said that every time he's reached out and tried hinting at things, it's been a mistake. So I think he isn't going to do that ever. And I think that's what these books are. But the frustrating thing about that is there's so many stories in these books, and some of them are canon, but some of them are not. So it's like you have to decide.
And then bits and pieces.
Yeah, it's But I think that's what like GGY is and stuff like that. The hints.
Honestly, at this point, I feel like more important than anyone coming out to confirm anything would be some sort of light deconfirming of cut content, of parts of books are canon, like not necessarily being like, oh, this is exactly how Remnant works, but saying like, oh, this thing in the books, don't worry about it, that was just a story flare, or oh, these cut lines were cut because of an age rating or something like that. Like, just little things like that would really help. Not solve it for us, but clean up the mess in front of us.
And that's what I kind of expected from the Ultimate Guide and all this sort of stuff. But when I was in the Fanatic, we were looking at the Ultimate Guidebook, and it said some theorize. I'm like, this is unhelpful.
Yeah, some theorize. Yeah, that's what we said. That's what we're doing.
I think that's fair, right? But to contrast that, and again, this goes to one of the more controversial releases in the last year since Security Breaches releases, and as we're kind of in this middle period waiting for kind of the next big wave of things to come out, was the Character Encyclopedia, right? And that has, some spicy takes in it, right? It's got some things that I would argue are confirming or like 98% like FNAF 4 is inside the mind of a child dreamer. Like, that's the one that I go to, but there's a couple moments like that throughout that book where it's like, and this, and it's not the popular answer at this point, but it feels like it's trying to confirm it. But people in the community have really been like, they have not really received that book well, and I think that is like, I believe ID said it earlier where, or maybe it was Dan or Tom who's said, like, we have spoken some things into canon. I think it was Tom actually, who says, like, we have spoken some things into canon and now they're canon, and now we're kind of like stuck with some of that stuff. And I wanted to kind of jump in there and also add, I think to a certain extent too, there are certain things that the the audience and the fandom of this community have also kind of like accepted or adopted into canon and are so attached to, because we're so eager to have something solid to hold on to and some answers here to stand on, that we're really loath to acknowledge that when the character encyclopedia is like, hey, maybe it was actually the crying child the whole time's dreams, or hey, maybe Michael Afton was helping his father the entire time rather than being a walking corpse who's acting against him or whatever. Like, it's one of those things where I recognize that for as much as we've spoken things into being, I think we ourselves, like I know for a couple theories where I'm like, I think that this is what was intended, but the fan backlash has been so strong that I'm like, maybe I just back off of that. And it goes back to the dream theory, right? And what's inside the box, where Scott himself kind of felt the same way, where he's like, this was the story as I intended it, but I realized that the fans would have such backlash around this, or I was worried that people would react so negatively to it that I changed it, right? Like, he outright says that. And so again, it's one of those things that throughout the history of this franchise, Scott himself, us, a lot of other people have been, we're all co-creating this together, but at the end of the day, it's the fandom that is, deciding what they do and don't want to accept into their own personal headcanons in order to go forward. I think the character encyclopedia is interesting. Any thoughts in general around the feedback that the controversial character encyclopedia has gotten from anyone? Dawko, special thanks to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, no problem, guys.
Don't worry, Dawko, I do not blame you for it.
Okay, just to let you guys know, right?
This is your chance to clear it up.
Yeah, I just read over the book. Okay, I didn't write that it was the dream, that like the child was in a dream or anything. That wasn't me. Just to let you know, I just read it over.
Were you just spell checking?
Yeah, but basically, yeah.
Actually, it's not RXQYY. It's RXQT.
Yeah, please, Scott, basically. Respect your lore.
Yeah, be reasonable.
Yeah. With the encyclopedia saying that it's the the dream and stuff, like I know that people don't like that take, but surely, like I thought like it just could be like it could be both, right? So FNAF 4 could take place in a dream, but that bedroom and everything can still be real. If that does that make sense? So
I somewhat agree with that, actually.
Yeah, I think it can just be a mix of both.
My thing is, my issue was with it specifically saying that we play the nightmares in FNAF 4 as the crying child, because I don't know how FNAF 1 phone guy was making his way into the crying child's nightmares.
Yeah.
And Mike had to see Nightmare Fredbear at some point to draw him into the logbook. So I think that it's possible that maybe the crying child did go to these physical locations where he was messed with by William, and that maybe he projected those like similar dreams onto Michael, but Michael would still be the one we play as in FNAF 4 because elements of his experiences work their way in. So with the character encyclopedia saying, oh yeah, we play as the crying child in FNAF 4, to me it seemed more like that was taking popular fan canon, because a lot of what I see is people saying that it was the crying child and going based off of that. And maybe it was like there are ways that things in there could be interpreted to like come to other conclusions, but like the book also implied that Charlie in the book survived childhood. She died at the age of like 2 or 3. So I don't know. So like there are ways you can interpret things in order to make it work with what evidence is actually there, but I'm not going to like be fully reliant on it on the off chance that it says something wrong, like Bon Bon being in FNAF 3.
So yeah,
it is in there.
So it's
the one.
Yeah. So I want to dive deeper into. I definitely want to dive deeper into the character encyclopedia, because I think that it's an interesting take, right? Because it's an officially released thing that is something that has a lot of stuff in it, right and wrong. And so where does that sit in everyone's heads? I think that's an important thing to talk about. But going back to Dawko's point about like, hey, maybe things can happen at different times, or it's the same there's multiple things that can be happening here. I do want to call out something that I think is always really interesting, but also makes the lore that much more complicated immediately, which is you go back as early as FNAF 2. And FNAF 2, the tapes the training tapes, the phone guy tapes are welcome to your summer job at Freddy Fazbear's, but your paycheck is not in the summer, right? And so it's one of the, no matter how you slice it, no matter what hemisphere of the world you're working in, it is not the summer. And already that tells you that there is some weird timey-wimey shenanigans going on here between the tapes and the paycheck that you're getting, and maybe what you're hearing is a past event and what's you're seeing in the paycheck is a current event, or vice versa. Like it creates these layers of confusion, and it becomes very difficult to kind of like parse through that stuff, and let alone to not just to solve from a theorist perspective, but then to communicate that to an audience who is trying to process this in a 15-minute video where it's like, hey, we solved who Foxy, Glam Rock Foxy is or whatever. Like, where's he this game or whatever. So like, I understand the frustrations and confusion by a lot of the viewers and a lot of the fans where, when you're like, oh yeah, we're listening to tapes, but those tapes aren't actually happening in real time, and the security guard that we're seeing isn't actually happening in real time, and it's not 1987, or maybe it is. Like, we don't know, but here's the evidence of it. On one hand, I always want to go back to Occam's razor of like the simplest solution is the correct solution, or more often than not is the correct solution, because it just clarifies everything, and I think the audience would love that sort of thing. But on the other hand, you point at this franchise and it's like, FNAF 2, nightmare, but also they're real, and also Mike saw them at some point. FNAF 3, whoever's that security guard is has seen all the other animatronics at some point, so they must be there too, unless, as John said, he's envisioning the future, which is, a take that is possible, maybe.
He can't be envisioning the past, so.
Don't worry, John. I agree with you.
No, but there you go. Like, are they seeing the future? Are they seeing the past? Is it hallucinations? Is it Like, who knows? But I think like it is a very complicated series, and you can interpret it in a lot of ways. But anyway, that was my thoughts there. Real quick, any other thoughts on Character Encyclopedia before I let you go to town on my timeline?
I have a thought on FNAF too.
Taco.
Can we please
he's like, move on.
Actually, I've made some flags here, so let's just go on this one by one, if you don't mind.
Let me pull up the document. Hold on.
Well, I mean, John and I, a while back, we were on a call and we were talking about like the shadow animatronics, and like that was something that we were really kind of hoping to like, or I personally was hoping for more clarification in the encyclopedia, and it honestly left me with more questions than answers. Which is so interesting because, like, for the most part, all like in the first 4 games, the animatronics are like they're haunted because of the anger that they have towards Afton, and yet Shadow Freddy is the one that could potentially be helping Afton in FNAF 3 and night game mini games where he's leading the animatronics to be disassembled. And so I thought I had things somewhat figured out, and I was left with so many more questions after like just going through a few pages.
I think one of my favorites coming out of the Character Encyclopedia was like, oh, the giant silhouette of the puppet that you find when you fall down in the Mangle FNAF 3 minigame. That's apparently its own standalone character that may or may not exist depending on what timeline you're talking about. And it's like,
no phone guy.
Oh, okay, cool.
That was the other no phone guy or no phone dude.
No missing children either, which is like the biggest thing in FNAF.
Well, I think
in
there's
the
one
video,
Michael Afton was
encyclopedia,
missing.
I have this entire list that scrolls across the screen for like a solid 15 seconds.
That'll be on our follow-up stream.
The best quote in the book is still on Phantom Foxy's of just, he's in a worse state than Withered Foxy as his hook hand has gone astray, ... And in FNAF 3, his hook hand has gone astray. I love that so much.
They include it.
They really wanted to emphasize that point.
Stray guys.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, there's something about that hook hand.
maybe that's the biggest mystery of FNAF. Where is his hook hand? That's what it is. Forget what the timeline of events.
This is the new Toy Chica's beak.
Yeah.
No. Don't get started.
His hook hand has gone astray. Okay, so now that we've made Dawko sweat for more time than he really needs to, because it was not your fault, Dawko. Like, don't worry about it. Like, again, to clarify, dear Internet, let me talk to you, Internet. Do not give Dawko a hard time about this book. He just read it. So there you go. But it's one of those things where, okay, let's hop into actual timeline talk, since that's the thing that, we just finished. And for those of you watching at home, if you want to see our timeline all cobbled together as one seamless narrative, as a hour-long, beautiful, arcing story narrative, whether or not it's true or not, it is available right now on Spotify. Actually, John is excited about that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we we're starting to
There you go.
port over some of our old episodes, our favorite episodes, over to Spotify, since we've heard a lot of people telling us that, hey, I don't have YouTube Premium. I want to turn off my phone. I want to just be able to listen while I'm coasting down the highway or whatever to some of Matpat's obnoxious voice. And so there's I think 20 episodes or so over there at this point. So they're over there right now, and as a special kind of hey, it's launch day, we put together all of the FNAF timeline, just narrative bits together into just kind of it's like an audio podcast or an audio book that you can listen to. So that's available on Spotify right now. Just look for us over on Game Theorist or Game Theory, and you'll find us.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Congrats.
really,
Thank you.
Really
It's
quick.
exciting.
Really quick before we get into the content and start tearing apart the theory.
Or
you're meant to be on our
supporting it without reservation.
Sorry, man. I watched it and I'm ready to tear it apart.
Or supporting it without
You
reservation.
edited.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to talk about. It's editing this thing was perhaps one of the best edits I've done. It was so there are certain theories that you can tell that the editors just suddenly click, and it's just yes, this is what we want to what we really want to dig into. And this was one of them. Matt, I was telling you about when you were out here, is that I did only 2 minutes out of that entire thing. Shout out to every editor that worked on it.
Every editor who we have on staff, basically.
Yeah, it Tyler, Jay, Pedro, Warak, I think Dom touched some of it.
Sedge did some of it.
Sedge, I only did 2 minutes of it, and it was probably at least for 2023, that's going to be my favorite 2 minutes that I've edited out of the entire year.
I will say it was your edit was one of my favorite edits that I've seen you do specifically, but just in general for the timeline, I love that section.
Yeah,
no one knows what we're talking about, but it's a good section.
Do you want to shout out your section, Dan? You can shout it out.
My section is where is the actual first Afton murder. Yeah, was the section I did, and there was the point where I was looking for a crazy laugh. I couldn't find one in our Epidemic Sound stock sound effects. So I just went and recorded Afton's crazed laugh myself and went, all right.
Whatever works.
Scarily good. Scarily good.
I know. I have moments. And the fact that was one of those moments is concerning to me.
It's not every day that you're able to put yourself in the mindset of a serial killer committing their first murder. It's
not every day for you.
It's called acting.
It's more frequent than you would expect, honestly. But honestly, anyway, it was I think the whole Theorist team, we recognized that there were shortcomings in it. We recognized that there were certain logical leaps. We knew what was going to be controversial, and we tried to lampshade the living daylights out of it because we're this is going to make people mad, but let's do it. But I think across the board, it was one of those moments where it felt really climactic for us as a team, and it felt really nice. And so I'm more than eager to talk about the factual inaccuracies or the theoretical inaccuracies about it, but it's one of those things where just as a product of all of us working together, I am so proud and constantly in awe of the team that we have that worked on that to put that together, because it's great. It's one of those moments where I look back on the catalog of there's 1,000 theories across all the channels at this point, which is disgusting in its own right. God, I'm so sick of my voice at this point, but please stop. But no, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, that is one of those pinnacle moments of that's awesome. I'm really proud of us.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with your timeline then?
Am I satisfied with it?
Satisfied, yeah.
I am. Here's the thing. I am narratively satisfied with it. I am satisfied with it as a story that is available to listen to on Spotify, and it's a delightful listen. But and I'm satisfied with it from a creative standpoint. Am I satisfied with it from a all the questions are answered thing? No. And I think it's one of those, I tried to make that very clear in kind of like my post episode talkbacks where I'm like, here are the big gaps of logic and here are the things that I don't have a good answer for, but I want us to, the thing is, if I waited to solve it all, it would have never come out, right? Yeah. Because I think as we've talked about this, for the last hour at this point is, you can't let the perfect get in the way of the good, right? And I think we all need a place to talk about stuff, and then from there we can build and tear down and like focus on individual moments, right? So with that being said, and hopefully you've all watched or at least listened to the theory at some point, there are definitely some controversial elements. First off, things that seemed generally agreed upon. What things as a group can we collectively say like, hey, that seems about right?
From what I've seen in my comment section, because I've made a video for almost like every part at this point, the comments that I've been getting seem to mostly agree that part 2 of the timeline seems to be the most agreeable. Mm-hmm. I've seen like, there's been people disagreeing with some parts of 1, 3, 4. I've gotten maybe like 2 comments of people like, I don't agree with part 2. Mm-hmm. Part 2 definitely seems like the strongest of the timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's,
I think put that too, yeah. On my notes, I've put good timeline for the second video.
Okay, Dawko has his notes, so since Dawko's referencing his notes, feel free, hop in.
The dancing bear! What are you talking about?
I was waiting for this.
Okay, no, I think that's a really great place to start. So let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. With the dancing bear show, right? So obviously, as we talked about earlier on this live stream, right? Steel Wool wants to make a Fredbear's Family Diner origin story, but as a part of that, in Security Breach, there is one poster, and it is in black and white, and it says Fredbear's Singin' Show, where tickets are a couple cents or whatever it is, and if you track back the style of animation, if you track back the cost of the ticket, if you track all of that back, it all links back to, what is it, 1930s? Like, right? It's 1930s. And so very clearly that is the starter point of the franchise. And if you look at the history of entertainment and like circus-based entertainment, you have dancing bear shows in rural towns or kind of like sideshow attractions where there is a trained bear who literally is like doing a little jig or whatever. And so for me, if this is truly the start of the story, or at least the first, like, hey, it's in the game, it is there, and it's referencing in some way, it can't be, like any of our main characters themselves who are initially I'm like, oh, I'd like that to be, William or Henry or one of our guys who like then goes on to make it into animatronics, but like that's the first domino that falls. But from and don't get me, we'll talk about Mrs. Afton and how she is not 90 years old, or 120 years old, guys.
Please, let's do that.
Math is not hard, friends. Everyone's like, she'd be 120. It's like, do you math, bro? Like it's not hard subtraction. Like granted, I'll admit that I messed up by saying like, oh, Elizabeth would be like young or whatever. Like that was my mistake. Like, but after everyone being like, she'd be dust. I'm like, no, she's not dust. We'll get to that. But for Fredbear's, right? So if it can't be any of the guys themselves, like I was fudging the dates a little bit so that way William Afton could be like, I was assuming it's like late 40s era where he's able to see that as a young kid, and that being a formative experience that makes him want to go on to make animatronics that recreate that magical moment, right? Because either that or it's a family business that they've inherited, right? Like whether it's William or Henry, because Security Breach is so focused on the Afton family, and there's a lot, and it's that poster is at the Afton table and this and that, because of all of the Afton references that are throughout that game. Do I think that Freddy links closer to Henry in like the graphic novels and stuff? Yes, but because Security Breach is so fixated on Afton, and because that's at the Afton table and all of this stuff, I'm like, well, it must be united to Afton in some way. So either the Afton family had a singing show of a bear that then William goes on to recreate in animatronic form, or it was a formative experience that he then kind of tries to recreate. And I was looking at Walt Disney, I was looking at the history of Chuck E. Cheese, and all of those things really lined up with kind of like his origin or his motivation. So that was my thought, but clearly you disagree or have thoughts for yourself.
Oh, no, I just said it as a joke.
I will say, I have a friend who's from Hurricane, Utah, and she was mildly. The thing is, Utah doesn't have bears apparently, so she's like, "What on earth is a bear doing there?" Like they have black bears, but they don't have grizzly bears.
Okay.
So she was a little.
Oh, they do have bears.
There's a bear. It's a bear.
I guess there are also traveling circuses.
Unless they somehow shipped that grizzly bear from out of state.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
traveling show, man. Traveling show.
I mean, it's just interesting that Steel put that in the game in the first place, right?
Yeah.
With the other two posters as well, when the game doesn't really have any references to Fredbear's apart from those three posters, right?
Right.
So, and they've already said the interest with. What? Sorry.
No, I was going to say there's one more unfortunate reference, which is Glamrock Freddy's purple bow tie, which I don't even want to get into.
Oh yeah,
Glamrock Freddy.
Glamrock Freddy, yeah.
And they're Steel Wars interesting, mate. Like they've said before that they're interested. So I feel like maybe they put those in if they didn't really connect with anything else.
Yeah,
they might have been hinting
sense.
like, we might be making a Fredbear's game in the future, hopefully.
It's a Scott move. It's being vague, and then so I can pick up on that later and expand on it later.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of
yeah.
But it's there, right? And
Yeah,
so
it's there.
No, yes,
like,
it's important for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. And again, as I'm not just only creating a timeline and a story, it's also like, what are the things that people haven't heard before? Because, and again, this goes to like what I was talking about earlier with Hyperdroid and your timelines, where I like seeing it from a character perspective. I like seeing it from a narrative perspective, because I feel like, me talking about fingers and toes of robots for like the umpteenth time, it's like people have heard this, you get lost in the weeds. Whereas again, I wanted to pitch this for, like we've been talking about this whole time, the casual FNAF fan who is like, the lore is overwhelming for me at this point, but I can understand and comprehend a narrative about these characters. I can understand like motivations, character arcs, and humans, actual humans, rather than plot device, event. Yeah. That was my goal with this, and that's why laying that groundwork was so important, even though I knew that the only thing that I had to like hang it on was there's this one poster in the most recent game, but it's there and it's in black and white, and based on all the evidence and history that we, the real life research that we tend to do with this stuff, it all matches up pretty cleanly.
I agree with that. I think you were right.
Oh, thanks,
I think
John.
you were right on the nose, and that was really awesome. I liked that a lot.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. My main concern was like, okay, if Fredbear's singing show is its own thing owned by someone else, and then there were like, and then Williams using the same Fredbear's name, would there be issues with that? Because then you brought up copyright stuff later. I'm like, well, if he's using Fredbear, and then someone else had Fredbear, but if it is like a family business, like maybe his parents had it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where the British accent came from. They decided to come from the UK,
right.
And then say, you know what, we're going to give these Americans in Utah a dancing bear.
Well, I mean, that tracks with the history of vaudeville as well.
Yeah.
Like, vaudeville was very much an imported thing of entertainment, where like early on people would come over and like, well, we have this theater background, let's do these traveling shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. My thing, I like it a lot, because the one thing that's always bothered me with FNAF is not truly understanding like how Afton thinks or what his motivation is, other than like the first 4 games, it's, oh yeah, he bad guy.
Yeah.
And slowly, and slowly through the books and some of the other games, we kind of get a bit more context. But the idea of establishing very quickly, like narratively starting off with a passion helps motivate or continue to motivate him throughout the thing. Like if he was just someone inheriting his family's business, he would have to be all in on that business as well. So even if maybe Afton saw it on the side, decided to do it, whether he inherited it, the fact is that he was passionate about what he saw and wanted to bring that to life without an actual bear.
Yep. So, okay, so that was controversial point 1 from episode 1. Controversial point 2 from episode 1 was, hey, the mediocre melodies, what are they? Like, and I think recently, again, this is one of those more recent, like in the last year revelations that, hey, maybe these things were more important than they initially seemed. do we have thoughts as far as like where they fit in, or kind of like what those might be? Because again, this is one of those in the character encyclopedia where it kind of confirmed a suspicion that I had, or at least heavily supported a suspicion I had, which is the fact that there is a Ned Bear and a Fred Bear, you know, and that the character encyclopedia calls out like, hey, he's pretty darn close to that Fred Bear guy, but just different enough to not be copyright infringing or whatever. That confirms something that I had suspected for a while, which is like, hey, it seems like they were coming from either a rival restaurant or whatever, and that also coincides with the Chuck E. Cheese parallels that might have impacted the early development of this story. Any thoughts on the mediocres, or we're all like, hey, Matt, you knocked it out of the park on that one?
Well, I just put like, I thought they were just made for just Pizza Simulator only. That they are new, and the reason with the batteries at the back, like the battery powers, is not because they're old, it's just because they're cheap knockoffs. And I just thought that rip-offs for Henry's location, just for the Pizza Simulator location.
You do have to like buy them from catalogs and stuff, so
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. But at the same
I don't
time,
care either way.
Cool.
I
Okay.
don't care either way. Yeah. So
okay,
like,
great.
Either way, if they're old or new, it doesn't really affect anything anyway, which I thought. So I don't
They
care.
exist, and that's cool.
No one cares. Okay, awesome. I think it fits with their personalities. Then great.
If they were older, Henry had the rights to the company back then, so he could have just made the original Freddy game.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
so like, why would I think it makes more sense that he lost the company and way in the future had to make these because he no longer has the rights to the original ones.
Yeah.
That's why it's a knockoff of Freddy Fazbear or Fredbear.
Yeah.
And one thing that I did think about with the part, whatever of your timeline,
Sure,
I don't remember which part was in which one. Sorry,
I don't either. No.
But
No, I do.
one thing was like you had it so that Williams' company went and was not doing well financially, and then it got taken in by Henry's.
Yeah.
And what seemed off to me was like, okay, if Henry's is the one that's succeeding, why wouldn't they go with his characters?
It is weird, right? But if you look at the history of Chuck E. Cheese, that's kind of what Chuck E. Cheese did. Where and again, like it's one of those things where you're like, why would they do this as a business decision? But Showtime, I believe it's Showbiz Pizza, was the more successful franchise at that point, and they are the ones that bought out or like bailed out of debt Chuck E. Cheese. But Chuck E. Cheese was the franchise that they decided to move forward with, and the characters that they decided to put in the spotlight for reason like just.
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
It's that thing of characters can still be successful and recognizable as characters. The business doesn't necessarily succeed purely based on the popularity of a character.
Yeah.
And
see, but then I have the concern that in the Silver Eyes and stuff, William was the businessman who knew that, and Henry was just the robot guy.
That is true, and that's one of those things that again, like, doesn't frustrate me about the books, but I wish lined up cleaner in that, because you're absolutely right. Like, since the beginning, it's always like Henry is the creative one and William is the businessman one, right? Like, that's the books make that very clear. But it's hard to justify that against, you know, William being at least partially responsible for the Funtime animatronics that have like claws that rip open, you know, and him being this like mad scientist and him outright owning Afton Robotics. Like, unless he's convincing a bunch of people to make these things, you know, and especially like Henry to make these things, which I like is hard for me to justify from a character motivation standpoint. It kind of, you have to kind of like, well, he's the guy who's doing it, I guess. So that's
I feel like there was
that's the only reason why I in the games I challenge that, whereas in the books you're absolutely right, and I agree 100%.
Yeah, I feel like there was something in the Ultimate Guide while we were doing research for this where it suddenly talks about Afton's prowess in robotics, and we were like, wait, what? He was the business guy. And that's what got us down that train of thought.
I think you're right, actually. Now that you mentioned that, there was a moment where we're like, oh, that I hadn't considered that before.
I mean, also to just kind of back that up too, is like in the books, Henry's the one to make the robot kid, to make Charlie, correct?
Yeah.
And then in the games it's flipped. Henry kind of like,
are you saying that there's a robot kid? How dare you? I mean,
Cancer dad. Cancer dad.
No. The lower third has me covered.
Ash his
Get that
lower
sorted,
third
Ash.
knows nothing.
But like it's flipped in the games, whereas like Afton's trying to bring back his family, like according to like most timelines kind of line up with that. Whereas Henry very much like doesn't seem to be going down that path. So like again, like the books, they say, hey, you should pay attention to it, but they never tell you how much you should pay attention to it. What deals are or what details are incredibly important. And so
So
my thing is like, also in the fourth closet, William does end up making the Funtime animatronics.
Right.
So I don't know. Just like I feel like the characterization of the characters, like I feel like the main difference between the Silver Eyes trilogy and the games is, did Henry decide to rebuild Charlie?
Yeah. That's fair.
But other than that, I feel like things line up. Like would not necessarily all the events carry over because we have Charlie Bot, but I feel like the characterization and the general world building is something that would carry over.
Fair.
So
John,
Matt,
go for it.
You think Chica's Party World was the Mediocre Melodies with Chica, correct?
I pitched it as the other restaurant franchise, right? That Henry at one point. Okay, so basically it's that there's Chica's Party World or some equivalent that the Mediocre Melodies plus Chica existed in, compared to Freddys, which was Afton's franchise.
Yes.
At one point, Chica's subsumes Afton's or Freddys, and they create Freddy Fazbear's Entertainment, in which they showcase the greatest hits of both franchises' characters, which is Chica as well as the other guys. And the last thing I'll throw out there is one of the core points that I don't think I mentioned, but was brought up in the Aftermath, which, again, I'm glad about the timeline going out there so people can start looking deeper into these and debunking or supporting things, is in the FNAF 3 ending, you have the 4 masks lit up, right, in the bad ending. They have lights in their eyes.
5, actually.
Yes, thank you, 5 bad ending, because Golden Freddy's in the back. And you have Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, all with vertical slants in their eyes, or vertical like shutters in their eyes, and Chica is the only one who's different, who has a circle in her eyes. And so again, it seems to showcase that Chica is fundamentally different or separate from the other 3 animatronics.
I don't think so. But because Chica's Party World doesn't get introduced until way after FNAF 3 comes out.
It doesn't get mentioned until then.
Mentioned.
I mean,
but I don't think Scott had that in. Well, but
of course not.
But
we're
not saying exactly.
Guess what? Was there a Fredbear's? Was there a dancing bear from the 1930s thought about? But security breach decided, like, let's retcon that in there. Like, woo!
I guess.
No, not a retcon if it wasn't established to not happen.
No, you're totally right. Absolutely, that is absolutely a fair call. But I don't disagree with you. But also, we know that now, at some point in this franchise, there is a Chica's Party World, and that Chica was a headliner somewhere at some point.
Chica's Party World was only talked about in one place. It was in the source code of the Sister Location teaser as one of the places that the rental service, the Afton Funtime rental service, was renting out to. The only animatronic we don't see in Sister Location is Funtime Chica, who is different colors than the rest of the Funtimes. That is what I think, because there's no way that, like,
Showbiz.
I feel like saying that Chica's Party World happened so early in the timeline is discounting the only time we ever hear of Chica's Party World is with connected to that Funtime service.
It would line up with Chuck E. Cheese though, because Showbiz Pizza continued to exist for a long time after they purchased Chuck E. Cheese. They continued to work as separate establishments while sharing characters, and then eventually,
but that ruins your theory.
They merged. No, it doesn't. Because it means that because it means Chica's Party World you could say Chica's Party World could continue to operate as a
so
franchise.
They didn't merge early on to make Freddy Fazbear's.
No, they did. No, that's what I'm saying.
Companies are under one banner. There are just multiple restaurants, like how Taco Bell and Pizza Hut are the same company.
But we're talking about
food.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about the validity of content. The Chuck E. Cheese story isn't even content.
I mean, it's
like,
it's
true.
You're right, but this is again like this is one of those things that I, as a and again, we all approach theorizing in our own ways. Like one of the things that we've always done, like on the channels, is look at real world lore and real world science, history, math, whatever, and apply it to the logic of video games. If I'm a video game creator, say my name's Scott, right? And I'm like, I need to come up with a lore around my very Chuck E. Cheese adjacent video game. Where can I get, like, maybe I should be researching the history of animatronic, and mascot suits and things like that. And so I go back and I look at, like the history of Chuck E. Cheese, and I draw inspiration from that. Or, I mean, again, like in that episode 1, I specifically call out the fact that like the mascot suits that you see with 5 fingers, right? The mascot suits that people are wearing around that have 5 fingers. That only started in the mascot world because it was an innovation from Walt Disney at that time, who Disney himself was like, I want my characters to be able to hug and I want their hands to feel realistic and movement-wise. And so he created a separate, original human like a mascot suit that humans could wear that would match that. And again, like there is a very clear timeline that real world history has dictated around the design and activity of different mascot suits over the years, which maps on, at least, to some extent, like into a lot of the like technological advances and designs that we're seeing of the animatronics, the suits, it's spring locks or otherwise of the characters throughout the FNAF franchise. And so it matches the real world history. It matches the idea of like, if I'm a creator, I'm looking for stories to tell that I can kind of map on or draw inspiration from. So that's why you're right. It's not canon. It's not content, but it is a source of material that, if you're looking at a very meta sense of this, like Scott could have been influenced by.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to just whether or not did Scott want to completely take Chuck E. Cheese's history and like make
Import
it like beat by beat in his thing, and like that's a big thing.
No, totally.
It's tricky because like, shout out to Food Theory, but like when we covered it over there,
I
it's
love
really
that channel. It's great.
I know, it's so crazy. We work so incredibly hard. They work so incredibly hard over there.
Is that the guy that ate his own Christmas tree? He's weird.
He's a weirdo.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, it's so. There's so many things that you can like go, oh, he's totally pulling from Chuck E. Cheese, and then there's just enough stuff to go like, well, kind of like, I mean, our first theory on FNAF in the beginning was retelling an incident that happened at a Chuck E. Cheese. So it's like, it looks like he's looked at Chuck E. Cheese as a franchise to pull inspiration from. It's just a question of how much did he pull, just a little bit, or did he pull so much more?
Okay, so we all agree like that there is some funniness to the beginning of things. Let's hop into what I know ID has very strong opinions about, which is where's Sister Location? When is that game?
Give me a date.
Yeah, if anyone can help solve this one, that would be great.
I have had so many debates with people about this on my Gilded server. Hence my very strong feelings about it.
No, and I think at this point, like the reason why everyone liked episode 2 of our franchise or of our timeline is because episode 2 was like, here's the sequence of murders, here's how they happened, and we all basically agree like this is pretty much what we know happens in the game. And then Sister Location comes in and is like, here's this really futuristic tech. Here's Elizabeth's death. Here's Ennard. Here's the closure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, which is different from Circus Baby's Pizza World, which closed at a different time. Like, there's a lot of, like, I think at this point, everyone knows, like, oh, FNAF 4 is frustrating, and oh, Midnight Motorist is confusing, and whatever. But I think we've wrapped our heads around at least a lot of core components of those. But Sister Location is just the odd game out when it comes to, like, where does it fit, though, and why? And so, ID, I know you called me out on kind of, like, me taking a weird middle ground on that one. But I'd love, let's solve it right now. When does Sister Location happen?
All right. So I am personally of the opinion that it would take place before FNAF 2, or at the very least before FNAF 1. In part because I think narratively it makes sense that earlier on in the timeline, like as John has pointed out, Mike was helping William Afton, and he went to sister location on his dad's orders to put his sister back together. But after that point, I feel like Mike's activity... Sorry, I'm going to backtrack my thoughts a little bit. So there are a few factors. One, Mike says he's going to go find his father, and he shows up at the FNAF 2 and FNAF 1 locations pretty much, like, FNAF 2 days after William's there, it sounds like. And the FNAF 1 location, I put William's death before FNAF 1 for a couple of reasons. First, the animatronics in the Follow Me minigames have buttons like the withered animatronics. I'm not saying they are the withered animatronics or anything, because this would still be after FNAF 2, but because they were using the withered animatronics in the FNAF 1 location, they probably just finished repairing them and kept the same general designs, and therefore there would be buttons. I do know that some people have said, oh, the sprites are inconsistent between different minigames and different games. And like in one minigame, there's this whole thing where it's Withered Freddy, we know that, but there aren't buttons. But to me, it makes more sense that like in a simplified character sprite, you're going to only include the details that are necessary to understand what's going on. And it feels strange to me to add details that don't actually exist on those characters, especially since this was supposed to be the final game of the franchise. And then another thing that I found interesting is a phone guide. There are two things with phone guide that lead to me putting William's death before FNAF 1. And that's first, his phone call about sealing the safe rooms. So if phone guy was alive and he died in FNAF 1, that would have to put the thing beforehand. But if William did tear down the wall and then another wall got put back up, another thing that's interesting, phone guy in FNAF 1 says that if the animatronics catch you, they'll shove you into an animatronic suit, which implies he's seen that happen before, which could be William in the Springlock suit in the back room.
That is interesting. Huh. That's an interesting call out. I hadn't thought about that.
And as such, I would, because William was at the rental location, and the rental, I don't think it would make sense if the rental location opened and then was open through multiple Freddys opening and closings, based on handing it just saying the one closing Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. To me, that makes sense to just be like, one, they thought the franchise was over at that point or whatever, or at least the local one was over.
It's interesting.
William would have had to at some point.
Yeah. The closure line is written. No, you're fine. The closure line is really interesting because, you know, and it calls into question like, hey, the gameplay of FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 especially, like, are those open pizzerias or are those closed pizzerias? Because I called this out in my reaction to your reaction to my reaction to your reaction. Because all the content, internet content, is the Ouroboros eating itself. But like, I think that you can have the franchise closed down, but still need a security guard at those pizzerias because you need a skeleton crew or something to protect them, to make sure that vandals aren't coming in and breaking stuff and whatever. Like, you know, that there's still materials and equipment there in this old abandoned building, right? And so one of the questions I've always had, right, and it feels like to me that the gameplay sections of FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 are in, especially FNAF 1, is closed pizzerias, and you are just a skeleton crew security guard who's there just because someone has to be there, right? So for those gameplay moments to happen after the closure of the FNAF franchise, as we hear about in sister locations like Opening Monologue, I think you can still have validity there, and you can still be visiting those locations and having that gameplay even after the events of sister location.
I do
with sister location specifically, my thing is like, okay, which closure does it take place after? Because I don't think it would make sense if they had opened and closed a bunch of times and then hand unit just says, due to the closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I feel like that would have to be just one specific thing, because it makes it sound like the rental location opened somewhat recently.
Well, and last thing I'll say, and then I know, Riley, you want to say something, but like for me, it's one of those things where this goes back to John saying Chica's Party World, right? Where if I'm Fazbear and I have Chica as a star of my show, right? I don't necessarily want her headlining a different pizza place, but if all of a sudden, or like, you know, or maybe it was like an old brand that got revived after the closure of Freddy Fazbear's as a brand is now toxic because all these people are dying in it, so it's closed. But I'm fine renting the Chica animatronics out to the old franchise, or like rebooting the brand under her, because, you know, she was always popular. We had this other historical nostalgia thing here, but for Freddy Fazbear's to be open at the same time as Chica's Party World is open doesn't make as much sense to me, because then you have Chica in two different places at once. Rightos, go for it.
I like the idea of the gameplay of FNAF 1 and 2 taking place long after closing, like we see Dave Miller in the books do something similar to that. I have one main issue, especially with FNAF 2. FNAF 2, we get like one piece of newspaper after the closure that specifically mentions the toys are all scrapped. Mm-hmm. So if the toys have been scrapped, why would they be appearing in gameplay during FNAF 2 if it's long after the closure? But it contradicts itself because of the summer job thing, because that newspaper also mentions it's only open for a few short weeks.
Right.
So if it is truly a summer job, open for a few short weeks, it should have already been closed in November, and then the scrapped animatronics wouldn't be there.
But there's also things to the sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
But there's the thing in FNAF 2 where party tomorrow. That he's speaking live to whoever it is. There is a party tomorrow. Don't be there. You're not meant to be here. Blah blah blah. That is the last party they're having. Which he can't say this is the last party we're having tomorrow if it's not live and he's not there. That's my only.
Yeah, most of the FNAF 2 phone calls are pretty targeted to a live listener, and it wouldn't really make sense for them to just play these random things about, oh yeah, we're switching you to the day shift to a random security guard.
Well, you said exactly what I was going to say, but I'm going to add on to it. They mentioned that tomorrow is the last thing they're doing, and it's a birthday party, and you see the restaurant set up for a birthday party, and that's the last thing they did.
Right, so it's
that
still
insinuates
there
to me
years later.
Still there. Well, or months later.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, years was an exaggeration.
So that's
but
I think that was Scott saying, okay, that he was planning the date of the paychecks versus the summer calls. The thing about like, well, why would they be playing the phone calls? It's like, why does anything happen in FNAF? You know, it's like you have to tell the story somehow. You know,
well, and it is established in FNAF 3, right, where whoever the security guard is, strong possibility of it being Mike Afton, right, is you know, he's talking to Phone Dude, and Phone Dude's like, "Whoa, man, we found these ancient tapes. Listen to them." And you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna listen to these tapes for the next 5 nights," you know, and that's it, right? Like, so FNAF 3 kind of establishes that you are okay as a security guard, like listening to old tapes from like past restaurants or past installments.
Yeah, but FNAF 3 does specifically say, oh yeah, here are some old tapes.
I mean,
whereas the FNAF 1 ones, it does sound like Phone Guy is like had recorded them earlier, since he's like, oh yeah, this is my last week on the job, and clearly Mike's the one in the office.
Yeah.
But with FNAF 2, a lot of those messages are targeted to Jeremy Fitzgerald. It could be that like it was spread out, like each of those nights maybe wasn't a consecutive week, but I doubt it based on what I remember the Phone Guy calls. Hang on, I'm pulling up the Phone Guy wiki page.
Pull it up.
Grab the receipts.
Yeah, okay.
Here, while you do that, I gotta ask. Okay, so is Mike Afton, is that all the mics or no?
Wait, what?
Is Mike Afton is Mike Afton Mike Schmidt? Is he the security guard that we play as in all the different games, or no? Are they just random guys? Is this one of those things that we just agree on now, or no?
No.
I feel like the movie is trying to canonize that.
Sorry, there was a lot going on. John, I heard you first.
Oh, really?
I maybe not. I don't know. There was a lot of dialogue.
I think we play as Henry in FNAF 3, and I know.
Okay, let's move on from John.
Okay,
I talked to John about this, and I agree with him at this point.
Sorry, John.
No, okay, no.
John,
no,
I stand by you after.
Please
after.
move on.
Oh man, I'm sorry that Dan has decided to ally himself to you. That's just a bad sign.
Yeah, you got the cynic. Now everything's terrible.
No,
You hired him, so
it's good to have dissenting opinions. No, so John, I'm cutting you off for comedic reasons, but please let me know why it's Henry.
I guess I'll
You
go
really
back
wanna
to
dive
Adobe
into this?
then.
No, keep it brief because we still have to talk about Mrs. Afton and we're hitting the 2-hour mark.
I'm so
So
ready for Mrs. Afton.
okay, great. We're gonna hop to that next. So let's wrap this one up quick because we're already getting to that 2-hour mark.
well, ID was finding the phone calls, so I don't want to.
I did find the phone
okay,
guy
great,
stuff.
good. Okay, so let's do that real
Yeah,
quick.
it's
and then
so
we'll hop
like
to
the
John.
first one is like, welcome to your new summer job, and the second one is, see, I told you your first night would be a breeze or whatever. But after that, I don't. Yes, and then night 4 says, hey, night 4, told you you'd get the hang of it. Night 5, he says it's night 5. And then night 6, he's, hello, what on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? This place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. And such. On night 6. But
Right.
there isn't a phone call for when Fritz Smith is working there. So that could be during the time when it was going to be just temporarily closed. But I do think like that one newspaper says that the toy animatronics were scrapped.
Because it was closed for an
those calls
investigation.
do seem pretty targeted to the player, especially since after night 6, Jeremy's gone and now we're Fritz.
Targeted, maybe. Like I don't know. I think that I think that there's wiggle room there where you can say like, oh yeah, he's just listening to old recordings. Like
The thing is, it's the night 6 call specifically where it says, hello, what on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down. Why would they play that for the character? Because that's still Jeremy, because it's only
this is where you get to that classic
Storytelling
argument of what's a story versus what's gameplay mechanics. Like, why would a security office have no door? Like, it's things like that where you start to go, that's the 6th bonus night.
I mean, they do kind of explain that one in the game.
Sure, but it's like, would you sit there and go like, that is like, it's a bonus 6th night? Is that therefore canon, or is it the bonus 6th night? Like, where does that fall? And that's again where this sense of like, we have no clarity on anything starts to mess with it.
Yep. John.
Technically, by that logic, we could say Fritz doesn't exist because it's the custom night.
Technically, yes. Technically, you are correct with that. And hence, I say it's very unclear.
And I am not going and taking that lead.
Can I just make sure that I'm here?
Yeah, you are here.
I just
you're
disconnected for a second.
No, you're
Okay,
great.
good.
You're golden. You're golden, as they say. John, please.
You're actually golden.
Yeah, convince me that that Henry is the protagonist of FNAF 3. Actually, please don't. But I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
I mean, to hear why you think this.
So the main points are we're hallucinating burned versions of the past animatronics. The animatronics in the building in FNAF 3 are not burned, period. So we have to be hallucinating something that is going to happen.
I mean, not necessarily. Like, there's a lot of animatronics out there in the world. There's like you.
Oh, Matthew, come on now.
There are things not burnt versions of the animatronics around the FNAF 3 location, is the thing.
Say that one more time.
There are versions of the FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 animatronics around the building that aren't burnt, is the issue.
Yes, and there's the Balloon Boy that's burned, and Balloon Boy's sitting in the box right in front of us.
Yeah, but there's
not
multiple versions of all these characters, John. Like, I mean,
that is also true.
If you go to the Fazbear Fright story, what was found or what I found or what we found, it's literally
what we found.
The FNAF the whole plot is literally, hey, I'm a security guard in Fazbear Frights or the equivalent. And I am. Oh no, sorry. It's it's the one where Michael is going around and collecting all the like remnant agony infused things, and he's like, I'm gonna take this one too. Like,
What?
Sorry, which one is that? That one is the boy who gets possessed by the Freddy mask.
You're the band.
You're the band.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway. Sorry,
Michael characterization finally.
And also in what we found now. Okay, I've collected my thoughts. In what we found, the FNAF 3 security guard is having hallucinations about his dad who mistreated him and who did all these awful things to him as soon as Springtrap enters into the room. And so to me, similar to GGY, as like this is as one-to-one as you can get in this AU alternate universe, this feels pretty one-to-one with like the security guard of FNAF 3 has a bad childhood, series of memories with whoever's in the Springtrap suit and is thus having hallucinations and visions or whatever. So like that's my counterpoint there. But also there's just a ton of these animatronics that are just like roaming around the world at this point. So
I get. If there's duplicates of the toy animatronics, they would only be in the FNAF 2 pizzeria. So if he burned the FNAF 2 pizzeria down, all of the animatronics in that building would go down with it.
True.
Right?
What were you saying?
Like, unless there's multiple versions of the toy animatronics at different buildings throughout the universe.
Now, I get what John's saying. I'm pretty sure when FNAF 3 released, I made a theory video exactly what John's saying, that the night guard was hallucinating his future actions and the hallucinations are just trying to scare him. So
what we found also doesn't convince me. Because also it's like a 23-year-old kid and Michael would be like 45 at that point. And did he have the abusive childhood or did the crying child have the abusive childhood? He was the bully to his younger brother. He then went on to go help his dad throughout collecting the animatronics for Remnant.
But what was his motivation to do that?
To bring his brother back because he knew his dad could bring people back to life.
The thing is, Michael seems pretty confused in his sister location speech. He says, "I should be dead, but I'm not." Like if he knew what was going on with the Remnant stuff and was actively aware of and helping William, I feel like he wouldn't say that because he would just know.
Well, it's about bringing dead people back from the dead, not injecting Remnant into people who are already alive.
But he is a dead person coming back from the dead.
But he was injecting with Remnant while he was still alive.
I feel like we're gonna.
This is not gonna.
Which came first, the Remnant or the egg? Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, you think he's hallucinating what's to come? You think it's what's to come?
I do think the idea of him hallucinating what he's going to do, I do think that hallucination and burning the place makes sense. Sorry. Going great.
I think saying that like there's multiple versions of the animatronics everywhere is not an Occam's razor point of view. I think it's the animatronics sitting in front of me are the animatronics. Also the Ultimate Custom Night cutscenes are so solidly Henry versus William. William is the fox, Michael is Mangle in the anime style cutscenes. And the whole theme of those cutscenes is Henry keeps coming up with plans to try and stop William, but he keeps failing every time. Like, if he only failed in FNAF 6, which is something we don't learn until Security Breach, that would make no sense towards the story.
Sure. Dawko, you had thoughts. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, like John's theory about him having hallucinations of the future, that can work with Michael as well. It doesn't have to be just Henry.
Exactly.
Like it could be Michael having those hallucinations.
It's whoever's sitting in that chair in that moment.
Yeah.
And there's that one line in Ultimate Custom Night is from the Vengeful Spirit. John and I talked about this on Twitter a little bit, where the Vengeful Spirit says, "I will keep you here no matter how many times they burn us." Mm-hmm. And we can see, based on like the good and bad endings of like Happiest Day, that the Vengeful Spirit was to some degree in the FNAF location, whether or not you think soul splitting was involved or whatever. And William was also there. And they burn us implies two people doing the burning. Henry burned in Pizzeria Simulator. The other part of the they burned William and the other animatronics in the FNAF 3 location.
Well, you saw my reply to you, didn't you?
I like that bit by bit we're going through the DMs of these two, just one after the other. Like, well, we reply, yes, please. Pixar, it didn't happen. Yeah, what's now?
Vengeful Spirit was not burned in FNAF 3. There were no endoskeletons in FNAF 3. So, like, the burning is Michael burning the endoskeletons down in the sister location.
I agree with John 100% here.
And Henry burning in the FNAF 6 pizzeria.
Then why would the Vengeful Spirit say, no matter how many times they burn us? So
I just said that. Just like, Michael burned them in the sister location bunker. No, you're good. You're good. Michael burned them in the sister location bunker for Remnant. That's the family Afton's using these kids and their souls for their own selfish purposes, and Henry burning them for good intentions to try and help them move on. in FNAF
The thing
6.
is, we don't see any fire-related things in Sister Location. We get there, and it's like Mike's first day on the job, being introduced by hand unit. He gets put in the system as Eggs Benedict, and
Molten Freddy.
there's
right?
no fire hinted at there. So I'm So I'm hesitant to just say, "Oh yeah, he was randomly setting things on fire."
Well, you can see the lava falling off of Molten Freddy in his design.
I mean,
right?
lava and fire, though, are two different things. Anyway,
Well,
sorry.
not
Okay.
lava.
I mean, lava. Excuse me. As we all know, in FNAF 6, there was the volcanic eruption. Which spewed magma all across the hurricane.
Yeah, second Pompeii. We all know.
As we refer to the PMI incident, or the Pompeii mediocre melody incident. So anyway, Dan, you had something to say, and then I got to talk about Mrs. Afton because
I'll make this as quick as I possibly can because again, this is something that John and I talked about. Is also it kind of lines up with a lot of the copyright stuff that we were talking about before because FNAF 6 is like FNAF 6 happens immediately after FNAF 3, and FNAF 6 is when the company's fully dissolved, which means that FNAF 3 would have had to somehow license the likeness of Freddy and friends because if you look at all of it, it's not different enough to not fall under copyright issues.
Yeah.
So Henry would have known something was up because he would have signed the papers on that as one of the owners of.
I just love the fact that so much of this franchise now is like, according to U.S. copyright law and patents, So
yes, the moment he said Fazbear Entertainment Corporation dissolved, and now there's Fredbear. It doesn't matter. Yeah. LLC, whatever.
I do think that the Fazbear's Fright location could have been like by Fazbear Entertainment, but that brings me to the logbook. Something that Hyperdroid pointed out to me a while back is that in the logbook, it's the FNAF 3 office, and Mike is the one who writes in it.
Yeah.
Great.
So anytime the office is shown, it's the FNAF 3 office, and Mike is the name on the inside cover, drawing pictures of casual bongos and circus and like the.
But did he draw anything related to the FNAF 3 game and the FNAF 3 office?
There's also that what looks to be Phantom Chica on the back page or whatever.
Oh, Logbook Chica.
Logbook Chica.
Hey, Doggo. Where was Logbook Chica?
There's also
in
the laptop
computer
closer to the present. But generally speaking, unless that office specifically is the FNAF 3 office design.
All right.
Logbook Chica was just a teaser. Right.
Nothing is just a teaser, Doggo. Nothing is just.
No, it was.
Coincidence.
From when Scott used to do these logbooks and stuff, at the last page, it was a teaser for the next game. Like the circus, Scrap Baby was a teaser as well. They were just teasers.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I
don't think it meant anything.
Dawko's tired because it's getting close to his bedtime, so let's wrap this up with Mrs. Afton. And then
it is quite late here.
I know it's getting late for you guys. Yeah. So and I know I said like, we're gonna cap this at 2 hours, and then of course we don't, because that's me. Man. You know, I make a 3-minute video into a 2-hour reaction. So real quick, Mrs. Afton, is she relevant? Is she not? I'm going to Rye Toast on this one because you have thoughts, and I've seen your thoughts.
Okay, so I have a few things. First off, I agree with you. So coming from someone who doesn't like Mrs. Afton right now in the narrative,
she is a lovely woman.
No, she rubs me the wrong way. But I as someone who doesn't necessarily like that, I don't think age is a good counterpoint to it. Because like I went into it, all we know about her is she has like a early teens son come 1983, and that would put her at like at having a child in the 70s. The average age at that time was 21 years old. By 2030 she's like 80. That's totally fine, you know. And that lines up. And like, yes, William would be like 20 years older, but it was the 70s. Those things happened. But my question, and I get that this is more of what's a more compelling narrative, and I see Mrs. Afton as being more compelling as a narrative. Where is the line between evidence we are willing to look past for narrative's sake with things like Mr. Burroughs in The Storyteller, who isn't the CEO, and that was pointed out to me, but he is a very high up figure who fits in that slot almost perfectly.
Okay, so real quick, and this is one of those where when I was writing this timeline, this story did not exist, but I think like this is so like, you know, that's one of those things, but for context, right? And if you actually, I think you're probably the best, since this is your theory, I'd love for you to just quickly like tell people like, wait, who's Mr. Burrows? Like, what is Mr. Burrows? Like, what is that? So if you can, like, please inform people of what exactly that is, because I think that's important, because this is a very new thing that just came out, and just a small subset of people actually know about.
So so Mr. Burroughs, this is from The Storyteller, from the same book that gave us GGY. This basically told us the past story of an earlier Pizzaplex where Mr. Burroughs, who was, I believe, head of the board, or at least chairman, someone very high up.
Yeah,
chairman, who was spearheading this initiative to replace the entire creative team with an AI called the Storyteller. And then that's where we get a lot of things that we're not going to get into, like Tiger Rock and Mimic One and a whole bunch of mess. But the main important thing is he's described as a child prodigy who always just wanted to be rich. That was the end goal. That was always, and he does not like Fazbear. He took down the paintings when he came in. He hates the brand, but he recognized that it was easy to make that profitable. And you can explain a lot of actions from the in-game CEO of a greedy businessman trying to push things through. Someone in my comments pointed out Hanlon's razor, which is don't ascribe malice to something that can be explained with stupidity. And taking and then you get to things like when you scanned in the motherboards and we create glitch trap. Yes, it feels like, oh, this was done to create glitch trap, but it could very well be, hey, this is a cost cutting measure, especially because we see someone like Mr. Burroughs cutting creative teams.
They say that in the VR game that they scan the chips because it was a cheap way to get the information out of everything.
Why do they build over the FNAF 6 location? Well, there is a chance they still owned that lot, and now that's something they don't have to buy again.
That sucks.
It sucks. It's terrible. Like, I hate it. Yeah, but evidentiarily, it fits better.
Well, I don't know if it necessarily. I don't necessarily think it fits better, right? Like attributing stupidity, you know, an accident to things is not necessarily better in my mind, and narratively is not as satisfying. So, and you acknowledge that, so I want to acknowledge that you acknowledge that. But like, I don't necessarily say it's a quote unquote better. But it is a story that does exist in this franchise at a time where the books seem to be dropping a lot of lore hints, right? So that is fair. And in our timeline video, I'm like, here's Mrs. Afton. She's now CEO of the company. All the copyrights and everything passed to her. She's the head of the dinner table in the Charlie room. That's all the evidence we got. And we know that there's a CEO who's manipulating things behind the scenes. I thought intentionally, but as Rai says, maybe it's accidentally, right?
And there could be a switch to that too.
Sure, totally. And in my timeline video, I'm like, she's the only character piece like on the table, really, that would make sense from a narrative standpoint, that would be able to do all of that, minus the exception of some new character entering in, like, you know, and so. That is the caveat that I throw out there, is if we're just playing with the pieces on the board that we have, that is kind of the option that makes the most sense, is narratively satisfying, and doesn't feel redundant. And I think my security breach episode, part 4 of the timeline, was mostly a lot of it built on evidence and a lot of it built on avoiding redundancies. You know, you could attribute any number of these characters to robot kids. You could attribute any number of these characters to like repossessed animatronics or whatever. But all of them, you know, because there's so many characters that have to be accounted for and explained in some way, you know, if you use the same thing more than once, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a cheap way out. So I tried to fit in, like, here's one possessed animatronic, here's one rebuilt kid, here's one human surrogate, here's one glitch virus thing. And that lineup fit as cleanly as narratively as possible, with the one remaining human that's left alive in this franchise, the mother, Mrs. Afton, being the head of the company who's trying to bring all of them back together. for me, that was satisfying and fit the pieces cleanly. But exactly to your point, there's this new book, there's this new story that came out after I would kind of like gone through the course with this theory that exactly, like you say, introduces this new character, completely unrelated, but has burrows as a name. So it's like, it's like a rabbit, get it? And he wears purple, correct?
I believe so. Or like, I have to double check.
Right.
There's something purple related to him.
Right. I remember there was some purple related to him. But like this idea of like, he's the cost-cutting guy, and so cost-cutting measures of scanning circuit board. Like there are definitely things there that can make, as much as I hate to say, like it's the new guy, it might just be the new guy, and that's that.
Doesn't he die by the end of the story though?
Yes, but that's what I want to get into. He dies from the storyteller itself, which the storyteller locks him in there, and we see the previous person who was locked in there is drawing stick figure drawings with crayon, writing "I'm sorry," which feels very like Afton taking over the mind, similar to Jeremy from Help Wanted. So if we see that, and then we have a CEO who gets locked in, I don't know, I'll have to check if we get confirmation he dies. We do know that he is locked in the storyteller, losing oxygen, and something within there named Mimic 1, which is likely going to be Burn Trap when we learn more about Mimic. We'll find out, who knows. But if that's linked to Glitch Trap, that could be the moment where the CEO becomes taken over by Glitch Trap, or at least replaced electronically via emails and via messages. And that's where Vanessa gets pushed forward. That's where a lot of the more things come from.
Dawko is nodding vigorously right now. Dawko's like, preach!
That's exactly what I was saying. Like the problem with the security breach timeline, that I don't think you mentioned Glitch Trap enough.
Sure.
Because FNAF VR took place, it brought in a new character, Glitch Trap, which is the virus. It was all about Glitch Trap, which then led to security breach, right? And I feel like it's all under Glitch Trap's influence with Vanessa. Glitch Trap's took over the whole location. He's infected people, telling them what to do to bring back. So the reason why they built the Pizzaplex above the location is because Glitch Trap knew that the corpse was underneath there, so he influenced the CEO, he influenced Vanessa to build the Pizzaplex there, to bring him back. I still don't think Burn Trap is Afton. I think Glitch Trap is literally a virus made by Agony. I don't think it's Afton. I think it's a separate entity that wants to come back and cause more agony to everything.
So you're saying that Glitch Trap is everyone. You're saying that but like really, right? Like because in my narrative, right? And again, like I totally recognize, like security breach I knew was going to be the most controversial because there is so many questions up in the air. But for me, it's like we see Glitch Trap, and at most he's infected 2 people, right? Through the VR game. He's infected Vanessa Vanny and whoever the other player character is, whether you believe that's Tape Girl or whoever we played as in that game, right?
Yeah. Gregory as well now because of the story.
Well, right. So,
So, I just feel like Glitch Trap has a bigger influence with everything, with the CEO, like with the new story, the storyteller as well.
Well, and that was my original pitch. For like, if you go back to our theories from years ago at this point, right, when Security Breach was first announced and we were coming out of FNAF VR and this and that, our theory pitch was like, it's the cult of Afton. It's a bunch of people who have been mind hacked by this Glitch Trap virus, and now you can't tell who's infected and who's not. And Security Breach is going to be this game where, like, do you trust Vanessa or do you not? Like, is she under the control of Afton or is she not? I really thought that that's where that was headed. I really liked that theory. I think there was a lot of evidence to support it. But then you get like Gregory, a kid who isn't infected by anything, and you get in the books, you get mention of like a CEO who is trying to rebuild things, and like, why would at that point, and again, like, this seems to be the theme of the night, right? Where it's like there's so much that happens in the meta text and in between games. But for there to suddenly go from here is the Glitch Trap virus to here's a Pizzaplex and a CEO who's infected maybe, and a Gregory kid who's infected maybe, and Vanessa's infected maybe. Like, suddenly you've jumped so many layers from one virus that in a game that kind of like gets closed down or whatever, or we're not sure what happens with the game afterward, but Silver Parasol Games gets closed down at some point, right? And let me double check that. Like, I might be talking out of my butt here, but it's one of those things where all of a sudden it's like you go from that to like everyone's infected and it's all glitch trap. I don't doubt that, and I think that's where I originally thought the story would go, but I was hopeful that there would be a couple more steps in the process, because again, it feels like such a broad logical leap to say that. And again, is it narratively satisfying? Is it not? Like, I don't doubt it, but it's just a big logical leap. And if people are laying claims against my theories as like, oh, they're not supported by evidence, or like it's pretty thin there, Matt, and I don't disagree. I would also say, well, it's pretty thin there too, to say suddenly everyone is a glitch trap virus. Whereas if you had asked me coming out of FNAF VR, that's where we were headed to.
Yeah. I have some things to say. The reason the mall gets built over the old pizzeria is because of Vanessa. And we learned that in the FNAF AR emails, and that is connected to the games because in the duffel bag message outside of Roxy's Raceway, it says, who approved this being built over this sinkhole? Yeah. And it was Vanessa, as we learned in the FNAF AR emails. So that is something. I think when Raito said that the storyteller infected Mr. Hops, in GGY, Gregory is one of these story ruiners. And I just made that connection of Gregory's possessed by glitch trap, storyteller, I don't know, doesn't matter. The main thing that I want to say is going back to me thinking, and you know, I'm ready for the complaints, but going back to me thinking that Elizabeth bots are a thing, and if anyone's a robot, it's Vanessa. The
Agreed.
whole plot of Security Breach is, do you trust Vanessa? The whole plot of Sister Location is, do you trust Baby? Vanessa and Baby have the same voice actors.
This is
Talking
true.
about weird connections, I just read something. Now, this is very likely one of those things where I'm just in way too deep and I need someone to smack me across the face. But I'm rereading the end of the Storyteller
at this point. Yeah,
I want you guys. I'm just going to read the last like couple sentences of the Storyteller, and I want you guys to tell me: is there a moment in FNAF that this reminds you of? Help! He shrieked, "Help me!" He screeched and hollered. He's inside the Storyteller at this point.
Which is a baobab tree, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
correct?
which is like a weird baobab tree for some reason.
For some reason.
Keening and high-pitched howls, someone had to hear him. Kids love the Storyteller tree. The chunky trunk with its swollen belly-like appearance made the kids giggle and play around it. That sounds exactly like Elizabeth's death. One to one. And I hate that it does. What does that mean? a person trapped
one to one necessarily, but they're
a person trapped inside the stomach of a robot who dies surrounded by kids drowning out their death. And
That's
if the
fair.
CEO is then taken over by Glitch Trap, the person that dies within the robot then goes on to work for Afton in some way.
I don't know. Whenever you mention bellies and people dying in bellies, to me, you're right that it's Elizabeth adjacent, but I also think of Funtime Freddy, who is known to have like a stomach.
Also Twisted ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, and Twisted. Like, there's a lot of comparison. Like, when I think stomach death, I think Fun Times, because the blueprints do that. I mean, that's the problem, right? There's a lot of reused
can we talk
elements.
About it? Are you in divorce, Scott? Can we talk about this? There's a lot of people in bellies.
So Ash has to have a life, and I have to pee.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, let's just call a spade here. So those I drank my entire Arab bottle. # not spawn, which is a hefty amount of fluids. And it was great, and I'm so hydrated now. But it's one of those things where I'd like to wrap things up. Obviously, a lot of debate happening. It's fun, and I don't know if we've learned anything here tonight, if we've solved or proven anything. But last thing I wanted to toss out there, and Dawko, if you need to abstain, feel free. But the teaser for the movie came out, and it's October 27th-ish, whatever. Yep. And the movie just wrapped. So, 1, hyped or no hyped? 2, worried or not worried about the fact that it's, hey, they just finished filming and it's April, and now it's coming out a couple months later. Thoughts, opinions? Don't all jump at once. It's fine.
I'm excited. I think it's going to be. It's fascinating to see. I'm really excited to see the vlogs from Dawko and people like that who've obviously gone out and seen all that. It looks incredible. So I'm excited to see it. Am I worried? No. But I come from filmy backgrounds, and I'm like, there's a lot of practical effects from my understanding, and Blumhouse is famous for that. So that is going to shrink the time down a lot. And Blumhouse has always been known for very short time scales of like start to finish production. So, and their stuff's good. It's not like they do it and everything they do is absolutely awful. It's actually really good stuff. So I'm excited to see what they do with it for sure.
Anyone else?
Hyperdroid, go ahead.
Thank you, John. But from the vibe I was gathering from Dorco, Aberine, all of their videos was that everything was running smoothly, nothing went wrong. It was all sort of going well, which makes me think that if they're so confident they can reach that deadline, I think I'm confident in them reaching that deadline. Just because everything seems to be going well, everything we've seen from the outside looks fine. We've heard good news, and that's it.
Cynic Dan is making faces.
You never know what happens in post. I can't, you don't know how many times they said, "Oh, we'll fix it in post on that set."
And you always do that, Dan. You always make it happen.
I mean, it makes me nervous to turn around something, especially when it comes to a movie. Like, it's doable. It's very doable to turn around that amount of time, but it is like it's tight for post-production. It's very, very tight for post-production. Beside that, I'm very interested. I'm very interested to see how it goes. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to be looking at it probably a little more critically than I probably should be, but I
mean, this is the room of the harshest critics, I would say. Excuse me. There are how many buttons on Freddy at this point?
I mean, the thing is
if Phone Guy isn't in there, I'm gonna cry.
I really, really want to be surprised. Mm-hmm. I think there's a big part of me that's like, I want to sit down in that theater and walk out and go like, that was incredible. Wow. Yeah. But I don't. I'm cynical. So
hesitant to get your hopes up.
Yes, I'm very hesitant. I don't know if if it's going to be a movie that you're going to have to go frame by frame in.
Oh, I mean, if it like, here's the thing: if the recent Mario movie is anything to go off of, I would like where it literally is. There are so many Easter eggs crammed into every frame of that thing, and knowing that Scott is behind this, and so like I would almost guarantee that there's going to be a lot of like hidden Easter eggy, like again, it'll be one of those like, what's an Easter egg? What's not, like, is this canon? Is it not? Like, but I think I would expect it to be definitely one of those where it's like just crammed full of like those little like, that's a thing. Like, let's figure that one out. That would be my guess. If Mario did it, then FNAF's definitely doing it.
And what's actually relevant and what's just there for the fun of it.
Yeah, right. That's the debate. Yeah. Hyperdroid, what's up?
There was an announcement like right before the stream. Not announcement, but the actor who plays Uncle Hank, which is meant to be Henry, he said that they're releasing it on Peacock specifically so the hardcore fans can go back and
we don't have to wait a month.
Watch it.
I saw there was a statement from Comcast as to why they're doing dual release. I didn't read it. I just saw it was there.
It's definitely marketing talk, but like at the same time, I see where they're coming from.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm tired.
I'm pretty excited about the movie. I got lucky with my joining of the fan base because I've just been sort of like glancing at FNAF from the side for like years up until Security Breach, and then that's when the movie starts. So I'm pretty excited. I didn't have to wait through the 7 years of purgatory. So.
Right? I was gonna say, you're just like, wow, what's everyone complaining about the wait on?
It was actually 8 years today that the movie was announced.
Wow.
Wow.
We did start getting news a while ago, so that's why I said 7.
That's
what
nuts.
2015, so that was like in God, that would have been around FNAF 3 or 4,
like right after FNAF 3 was
nuts.
My God.
All right.
A while.
That's
Right.
cool. I mean, that's cool that we're on the anniversary. Actually, I didn't anticipate that. That's really fun. Last but certainly not least, let's just go because I like my bladder is bursting at this point. I'm gonna have to crawl my way to the
You
toilet.
can go. It's
No,
all right.
no, I can't. I can't.
Okay, fair
Seriously,
enough.
I'm in so much pain right now. You can't tell. That's what you.
When
call,
aren't you in pain?
That's what you call a professional. I've been imbibing so much liquid today, it's crazy. But just to wrap things up, because I thank all of you so much for your thoughts and your time. Where can people find you, and what's the exciting thing that you're working on next? Let's start with, well, my team. You're committed to me, so like Tom and Dan. What are you guys up to these days?
Dan, you go, friend.
Well,
Well,
I'm editing. I'm editing a lot.
but you also have your own live streams where you and John
Yes,
just recently
so,
did like
yeah.
a FNAF reaction timeline thing. So
Yeah, John and I talked. That Cyber channel's where it's at. I'm maybe putting up a video this weekend, assuming I can bring myself to edit even more than I already have. So here's hoping.
nice, Mr. Dapper Tom.
Hello. Yes. So I'll obviously be writing. You'll be seeing videos that I'm writing on Game Theory, but I am streaming at Dapper Mr. Tom Live, and we stream all sorts of random games from my childhood, Sonic the Hedgehog, Kingdom Hearts, Pokemon, random things like that, and doing random challenges and just tea with Tom, just chatting. It should be fun.
Nice. Well, how very British of you.
I know.
way to forward the stereotype. Dawko, you do so many more things than just Five Nights at Freddy's. Tell me about yourself.
I just play other indie horror games. I think the most important thing this year, if you're interested, is what Tom said earlier. So me and a few friends went to the movie set and we vlogged it all. So closer to the release, around October, we'll probably be allowed to release the behind the scenes stuff of interacting with the animatronics and stuff. So look forward to that.
That's
Dorco.
That's awesome. John.
Go watch Dawko. Watch all of his stuff.
Great.
It's really good. I love his videos.
Awesome.
Matt, go pee.
Perfect. No, Hyperdroid.
Just stuff.
Go for it.
Just Hyperdroid and everything. I'm trying my best to do weekly videos, but no guarantee.
It is a
But yeah, I
brutal
hope
grind.
everyone watching enjoyed.
Awesome. ID.
Yeah, I am ID's Fantasy on all platforms. I'm working on, like, in the background of my mind, because finals are coming up, I'm planning on doing a video on the Candy Cadet stories. And I am so sorry, John, but whether or not Mike is actually the villain, I am sorry to pick on you in this regard.
You don't have
and if
to. You
people
don't
feel
have
liked
to
my
mention
pinned
me.
tweet on Twitter, you two said they would give me a free Bendy plush if I got to 4,200 likes on that. And I'm going to hold them to that if I can reach it.
Okay.
Are the Bendy plush still live right now? Can you buy one?
To my knowledge, they are.
Okay. Go to ID.
I'll buy you one. I'll buy you one.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, you don't need to buy. If I can get the free one, that's fine.
No, I'll buy you.
Okay. And last but certainly not least, Right Toast.
Yeah, I'm Rytoast on YouTube, Rytoast Games on most socials, because Rytoast was already taken everywhere. And as far as like new things coming up, I haven't really announced this yet, so I guess it's an announcement.
Ooh.
I'm working in the background to set up a second channel for like gaming videos and things
nice.
like that, because the main channel is all theories. That'll be Rytoast when it comes out, like TWO.
Amazing.
Yes. Perfect branding.
Incredible.
I don't know when that's gonna
Rytoast.
like a month or two, because
Sure.
I am barely keeping up with the weekly video grind.
Yep. Yep. Understandable. And for us over here, like I mentioned earlier, we're now on Spotify. So if you want to listen to our theories, new theories as they come out the week after, as well as some historic theories, as well as a hour-long, basically equivalent of the FNAF narrative as we concocted it in our recent controversial timeline that we talked about today. We're over on Spotify, so check that one out. You can listen to it with your phone off, which is pretty stellar, and you don't have to pay YouTube extra money to do that. So go check out Game Theory over there if you feel like it. And as always, my friends, Ash has something.
Yes. Hi,
Okay,
everyone.
yes.
So, I'm aware a lot of you asked questions in the chat. Thank you. I wrote a lot of them down.
Great.
And I brought in Sam, and he wrote more of them down. So stay tuned. Perchance,
Yes.
we will get a chance perhaps on a GTLive to go back and answer some. And
Yeah.
we could do like a let's hammer Matt with questions.
Great.
So stay tuned for that.
Let's
and
do
know I appreciate your questions very much. Thank you.
Thank you guys as always, and thank you all for joining me. Whatever time of day it is, thank you for your comments. I know I wanted to call it out, but I also you were signaling time, and I know it's tough. There was so much to cover. I know. We just got.
Don't
so
worry,
many good
chat. We
people.
love you.
Yeah, we absolutely love you. Ash was definitely making notes, and obviously we can go back and revisit all the comments after this is kind of like re-uploaded because we got the live comment feed. So no worries, we will definitely address them at some point down the line. But thank you guys so much for joining us this Friday night, and look forward to future stuff. You know, maybe we'll do another one of these when Ruin comes out, because I'm assuming Ruin will happen before the movie, and then after the movie, who knows? Like it is a toss-up. So we'll see the next time that we're all together. But as always, support all these wonderful people that you see on screen right now, and thank you as always for your support here. We love you so much. Now go out, solve FNAF, and looking forward to the next rise of new FNAF theorists out there. Now, if you excuse me, I need to pee. So as always, remember, that was just a stream, a live stream. Thanks for watching.